The age of the Earth is a concept that both fascinates and redefines our perception of time. If we imagine the entire history of Earth as an hourglass, human life and our entire history would be but a single grain of sand at the bottom. Time on Earth is measured in billions of years, during which the planet has undergone colossal changes. Continents have moved, climates have shifted, and life has taken on myriad forms. The earliest organisms, such as bacteria, appeared in the oceans when Earth was still young and hot. These microorganisms, possibly the first representatives of life, predated the emergence of multicellular organisms that began to populate the land millions of years later. If there were a river of time, the water in it would flow so slowly that we wouldn't notice the changes occurring over millions of years. Meanwhile, we humans have existed for only a few tens of thousands of years, and our entire history is but a few moments in this endless river. For example, the Neanderthals, who lived on Earth, disappeared only about 30,000 years ago, which is but a tiny fragment in the scale of geological time. We can only speculate about the eras and epochs that preceded the first civilizations. It is believed that dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 160 million years, and their era ended in a catastrophic event that led to mass extinction. This event marked a turning point, paving the way for mammals, including humans. During the time we were learning to speak and create tools, Earth witnessed numerous changes. Volcanoes erupted, glaciers moved and shaped landscapes, and oceans rose and fell. If we could observe Earth from afar, we would see it constantly changing, like a painting that an artist has been working on for millions of years. Mountains rise and crumble, rivers change their courses, and new species of animals and plants appear and disappear with remarkable regularity. Remarkably, most of the known species of living organisms, including humans, appeared on Earth only in the last few million years. It is as if all of human existence were compressed into a single second, while the entire planet and its history would take up a whole day. In this context, our existence appears as a pale shadow, a faint whisper amidst the roar of the vast river of time. We too often forget that all our achievements, culture, science, and even wars are but a fleeting moment in the mighty current of time. Looking at ancient mountain formations created millions of years ago, we can understand how insignificant our efforts are compared to what happened before us. Our planet continues to live as it did a billion years ago, when it was still young. Earth has survived numerous catastrophes, but always recovered and continued its long history. With each new discovery, whether it's fossils or artifacts, we merely scratch the surface of this endless depth. Every time we look at the stars, we are looking into the past, because their light reaches us after millions of years. This eternal dance of time reminds us that we are but guests on this planet, and its history is an epic in which we play a small role. Each new day is an opportunity to learn more about what came before us and understand how we fit into this grand history. Earth is a living book, its pages filled with stories that we are just beginning to read. The Earth in its earliest state was a molten, fiery sphere, where temperatures exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius, and its surface was covered by an ocean of magma. This magma layer churned like a boiling cauldron, spewing streams of molten lava and forming endless volcanoes that constantly emitted thick clouds of toxic gases. In this primeval chaos, the glowing magma illuminated the sky, creating a terrifying spectacle where ceaseless flashes and roars of volcanic eruptions reminded of the power and indifference of nature. Each explosion sent millions of tons of ash and steam into the atmosphere, creating an impenetrable veil that hid this fiery sea from the cosmos. Gas clouds composed of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and ammonia formed a dense cocoon, preventing sunlight from reaching the surface. In such conditions, metals were in a liquid state, and even iron flowed like water, forming lakes of molten metal that shimmered against the fiery landscape. The surface temperature was so high that water could not exist in liquid form. If it were to touch the ground, it would instantly turn into steam. The wind sweeping across this scorching wasteland was like a fiery breath, capable of incinerating anything alive. Volcanic ranges reaching for the heavens spewed plumes of smoke and ash, like ominous fingers stretching upwards, blinding with their brightness. With each new epoch, as the planet slowly cooled, the first continents began to form. But for now, this was a world of chaos and destruction. Time passed unevenly, and each moment was filled with the rumble and crackle as subterranean forces awoke to demonstrate their might. Collisions of tectonic plates caused earthquakes that shook the surface, triggering new eruptions and devastation, making it seem as if the planet itself was breathing, living in an endless cycle of chaos. This was a world where life, as we know it, could not yet exist, but it was here, in the depths of this fiery sphere, that processes began, which would ultimately lead to the creation of conditions for life's emergence. Nevertheless, in these distant times, when Earth was merely an untamed fiery sphere, its surface remained lifeless and hostile, preparing for a long path of evolution. The formation of early Earth began approximately 4.5 billion years ago, when a cloud of cosmic dust and gases began to contract under the influence of gravity. These particles, composed of hydrogen, helium, and heavy elements, aggregated into clumps that gradually attracted each other. Over time, this process led to the formation of larger objects known as planetesimals. These protoplanets grew by colliding with each other as gravity pulled them together, generating immense amounts of energy with each impact. One such collision, comparable in size to Mars, known as Theia, resulted in the formation of the Moon when particles from Earth's surface were ejected into space. These collisions not only facilitated the growth of Earth, but also released a colossal amount of heat, melting a significant portion of the material. Due to this molten state, heavy elements such as iron and nickel sank to the center of the planet, forming the core, while lighter elements remained closer to the surface. This process of differentiation took millions of years, ultimately resulting in the formation of mantle and crust layers. Simultaneously, on Earth's surface, oceans of molten magma formed, into which water vapor was released due to volcanic activity, contributing to the formation of the atmosphere. Such activity, occurring throughout this era, led to the development of conditions suitable for further evolution, including the creation of continents and the first forms of life, by the time 3 billion years had passed. At that time, the surface temperature ranged from 1,000 to 1,200 degrees Celsius, making it utterly inhospitable for life. The process of Earth's differentiation occurred under conditions where the planet was in a molten state, which facilitated the natural separation of materials based on their density. In this state, heavier substances began to sink towards the center, while lighter ones rose to the surface, forming the basis for the structure we observe today. This can be compared to the settling of oil in water. The heavy oil sinks to the bottom, while the lighter water remains on top. This separation was due to gravity, which acted on the molten materials, creating pressure and facilitating their movement. This process was not instantaneous, but took millions of years, allowing various components to interact and redistribute. In its early existence, Earth was hot and actively radiated heat, which contributed to the melting of components such as silicate minerals and metals. As the planet cooled, heavier elements like iron and nickel gradually sank to the center, forming a metallic core, while lighter minerals like quartz and feldspars rose to the upper layers. This process was critically important for the formation not only of the planet's geology, but also for the creation of its atmosphere and hydrosphere, as light gases like hydrogen and helium could accumulate on the surface. As a result of this natural separation, differentiation occurred, which became the basis for the formation of continents and oceans. Ultimately, this process laid the structural foundations of the planet, determining its tectonic processes and climatic conditions. It is worth noting that Earth's differentiation also contributed to the formation of various geological formations, such as mountain ranges and basins, which drove further development of ecosystems. Without this process, Earth could have looked completely different, and the living organisms that developed on its surface might not have appeared. Scientific research conducted in the 20th century showed that similar processes occur on other planets, such as Mars and Venus, where material separation based on density also took place. These observations allow scientists to better understand the evolution of planets and the mechanisms governing their internal structure. The formation of Earth's core is one of the most fascinating processes in geology, spanning millions of years. At the very beginning, When the planet was just forming, the surface temperature exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius, and the material elements were in a molten state. In this molten ocean of magma, heavier elements like iron and nickel began to gradually sink towards the center under the influence of gravitational forces. This process, known as differentiation, occurred slowly and took about 300 million years. As lighter elements rose to the surface, heavier metals concentrated at the bottom. At a depth of around 4,000 kilometers, where pressure reaches millions of atmospheres, iron and nickel were compressed, forming a solid inner core surrounded by a liquid outer core. The outer core, primarily composed of molten iron, has a temperature of around 1,800 degrees Celsius and plays a crucial role in generating Earth's magnetic field. This magnetic field protects the planet from solar wind and cosmic radiation, creating conditions necessary for life. The inner core, on the other hand, has a temperature comparable to the surface of the Sun and consists of metallic iron, which remains solid due to the immense pressure. Scientific research shows that the formation of the core was not only a result of gravity, but also chemical reactions occurring in the molten mantle. These reactions contributed to the increased concentration of heavy metals in the center of the planet, altering its internal structure. As heavy elements continued their journey to the center, they encountered various minerals and molten materials, significantly complicating the process. Thus, the formation of Earth's core became a true historical event in geological chronology, continuing to influence planetary processes and plate tectonics. Today, thanks to modern seismic research methods, scientists have confirmed the existence of the inner and outer cores, as well as their properties, opening new horizons for understanding the internal structure of Earth. The Earth's mantle is a vast layer situated between the core and the crust, accounting for approximately 93% of the planet's total volume. This layer has a viscous, semi-liquid consistency, enabling it to behave like a sea of molten rock under immense pressure. The temperature within the mantle ranges from roughly 1,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius, facilitating the formation of slow but powerful convection currents that transport heat from the planet's interior to its surface. These convective flows arise due to temperature differences. Hot magma rises, cools, and then sinks, creating a complex mechanism that affects plate tectonics. With its enormous mass, the mantle influences geological processes such as earthquakes and volcanism. For instance, mantle movements are responsible for the formation of rift zones and mountain systems, like the Himalayas, which resulted from the collision of the Indian and Eurasian plates. Studies indicate that the mantle's movement can reach several centimeters per year, which seems slow on a human scale but is significant on a geological time frame. Within the mantle, complex chemical reactions occur, forming minerals such as olivine and pyroxene, which constitute the basis of magma rocks. These minerals, in turn, influence the physical properties of the mantle and its ability to conduct heat. Notably, the mantle can contain a substantial amount of water in the form of hydrates and other minerals, which also affects its fluidity and dynamics. Consequently, the mantle is not merely a passive layer, but an active participant in geological processes shaping the surface of our planet. It contains approximately 2/3 of the Earth's mass, and its movements determine many key events on the surface, including the formation of oceans and continents. The Earth's mantle, therefore, is a powerful driver of geological processes, shaping the landscape we inhabit and sustaining internal processes that continue to influence the Earth for millions of years. Approximately 4.5 billion years ago, in the early days of our solar system's existence, one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history occurred: a collision with the protoplanet Theia, roughly the size of Mars. This collision likely happened at a speed of around 24,000 kilometers per hour, and its consequences altered not only Earth, but also its subsequent evolution. Upon impact, a colossal explosion occurred, with a force comparable to several billion atomic bombs, leading to the ejection of a vast amount of material from Earth's mantle and crust into space. This ejected material, primarily composed of silicates and metals, formed a cloud of molten and vaporized particles that, rotating, began to accumulate in an accretion disk around the planet. Earth's gravity, being sufficiently strong, captured part of this material, which gradually coalesced to form a new celestial body, the Moon. This process took approximately several tens of millions of years, during which the Moon gradually increased in size and its surface was subjected to intense meteorite bombardment. This event not only led to the formation of the Moon, but also significantly altered the conditions on Earth. The Moon stabilized Earth's axis of rotation, enabling the creation of stable climatic conditions necessary for life's development. This gigantic cataclysm, as it appears, became one of the key milestones in the history of our planet, shaping not only its landscape, but also the dynamics of its development for billions of years to come. The Moon's size is approximately 1/4 the diameter of Earth, making it the largest satellite in relation to its planet in the solar system. The collision with Theia and the subsequent formation of the Moon had a profound impact on Earth's geological activity and its biosphere. The Moon is not just a satellite of Earth, but its faithful companion, which has existed in this relationship for approximately 4.5 billion years, creating conditions that foster the development of life on our planet. This massive celestial body, with a diameter of 3,480 kilometers, creates a stable axis of rotation for Earth, which in turn influences the climate. Without the Moon, our planet could have rotated with great instability, leading to sharp temperature changes and, likely, making life as we know it impossible. It also plays a crucial role in the formation of tides and ebbs, which regulate the ecosystems of oceans and coastlines, providing vital conditions for many marine organisms. Research has shown that the tides caused by the Moon's gravitational influence affect the behavior of marine animals such as turtles and fish, which depend on these natural rhythms for reproduction and migration. Furthermore, the constant presence of the Moon has created unique conditions for the formation of Earth's atmosphere, and its gravity helps retain atmospheric gases, which is critically important for sustaining life. It has been established that the Moon played a key role in the formation of oceans during the early stages of Earth's development, when the planet was covered in lava and volcanic activity. At a time when the atmosphere was not yet stable, the Moon's gravitational influence caused water to condense and form oceans, which later became the home for the first forms of life. These interactions have occurred over billions of years, creating ideal conditions for the evolution of living organisms, from single-celled to multicellular, allowing them to adapt and develop. There is a theory that the Moon could have influenced the development of biological rhythms, such as circadian rhythms, making it not only a physical object, but also an integral part of the ecosystem. Even in the culture and mythology of various peoples, the Moon holds an important place, symbolizing the cycles of life and time. It has become a symbol of constancy and change, reflecting the interactions that occur in nature. Continuing its orbit around Earth, the Moon not only preserves our time as a natural calendar, but also continues to play a decisive role in shaping our world. As a result, without the Moon, Earth could have been a completely different planet, devoid of the conditions that made the appearance of life as we know it possible. The Moon, due to its gravitational pull, affects the oceans of Earth, causing tides that twice a day wash the shores. Tides are the result of the Moon's gravitational pull, which draws water towards one side of the Earth, while on the opposite side, an ebb tide forms. This process occurs due to the difference in the Moon's gravitational influence on different parts of the Earth, leading to the formation of tidal waves. On average, the height of a tide can reach up to 6 meters, but in some places, such as the Bay of Fundy in Canada, tides can rise to 21 meters, making them the highest in the world. These constant water movements shape coastal lines, creating unique tidal ecosystems where organisms like starfish, crabs, and various mollusks thrive. Tides and ebbs also play a crucial role in marine life, providing access to oxygen and nutrients for coastal inhabitants. In ancient times, when the Moon was closer to Earth, tides were even more powerful, creating massive tidal waves that swept onto continents. This phenomenon could reach heights of up to 30 meters, causing significant changes in landscapes and ecosystems. For example, millions of years ago, when the Moon was about 120,000 kilometers away from Earth, rather than the current 384,400 kilometers, tides could greatly alter coastal ecosystems, forming new habitats and influencing the migration of marine species. These fluctuations in water level also contributed to coastal erosion, which in turn altered geographical features, creating bays, river estuaries, and even new islands. Lunar cycles influenced the behavior of marine creatures, such as turtles, which use tides to come ashore for reproduction. Studies show that many fish and mollusk species synchronize their reproductive cycles with tides, increasing the chances of their offspring's survival. Therefore, the moon's influence on tides and ebbs is not just a physical phenomenon, but also a significant factor determining life in the oceans and along the coasts. The moon is not just a satellite of Earth. It is a powerful stabilizer that plays a crucial role in maintaining the angle of our planet's tilt within a relatively narrow range of 22 to 25 degrees. This tilt, known as axial inclination, significantly influences climate conditions and seasons. Without the moon acting as an anchor to maintain this angle, Earth could experience chaotic oscillations leading to extreme climate conditions. Some researchers, such as Dr. David Cheng from the California Institute of Space Sciences, assert that without the moon, axial inclination could change by tens of degrees over a short period. These abrupt changes would result in drastic climate fluctuations, making the development of complex life forms nearly impossible. For instance, without the stabilizing influence of the moon, Earth could experience periods of rapid cooling or heating, disrupting familiar ecosystems. Studies show that such oscillations in the planet's rotation axis, observed on other planets like Mars, lead to extremely unstable climate conditions, making life existence extremely challenging. In comparison, the stability provided by the moon on Earth has allowed for the development of diverse ecosystems and complex life forms. The moon, with a diameter of 3,400 kilometers and a mass of about 1/8 that of Earth, creates a gravitational interaction that prevents large oscillations of Earth's axis. This interaction also influences the movement of oceanic waters, contributing to the maintenance of stable temperatures and ecosystems. The stability of Earth, ensured by the moon, is critically important for the existence of life. For example, the climate conditions we observe today are made possible by this gravitational anchor. If Earth were to tilt more sharply, it could result in a significant portion of the planet being covered in ice or experiencing constant tropical hurricanes. This underscores the importance of the moon in maintaining conditions conducive to life on Earth. Studies show that even small changes in the tilt angle can result in significant climate changes, making the moon's role in this system even more critical. The cooling process of early Earth was long and complex, reminiscent of how hot metal transforms into a strong alloy, or how hot soup gradually cools, forming a thin film on the surface. Initially, Earth was a molten sphere of magma, with temperatures reaching levels where no form of matter could exist. Over millions of years, this molten sphere began to cool slowly, with heat dissipating into space. On the surface, the first layer of solid crust formed, much like the skin on cooling soup. This process was driven by the thermal energy released from radioactive decay within Earth's core and the residual heat from its initial formation. Cooling was not uniform. In some areas, the crust formed faster than in others, leading to the formation of the first continents that rose above the oceans of molten magma. Research indicates that during this time, tectonic processes also occurred, contributing to the formation of mountain ranges and basins. As the upper layers of the planet solidified, the molten magma beneath continued to move, causing volcanic activity. This volcanic activity played a crucial role in shaping the atmosphere. Volcanoes released gases such as water vapor, carbon dioxide, and ammonia, which, upon condensation, formed the primary oceans. These oceans, in turn, became the cradle for the emergence of life. It is important to note that Earth's cooling was not a linear process, but rather occurred with periodic bursts of activity, when the surface temperature would suddenly rise due to volcanic activity. Eventually, millions of years later, Earth's surface acquired a more or less stable appearance, with the first conditions suitable for life beginning to form. By this time, the material plate structures had already begun to take shape, marking the start of a new era in the geological history of the planet. There is evidence that it was precisely during this period, as the surface began to solidify, that the first simple organisms appeared. On the surface of the molten ocean of magma, the first solid patches began to form, representing thin, fragile crusts that were created due to the cooling of the magma. These crusts were unstable and constantly broke apart under the influence of internal planetary forces. The first islands of solid rock, similar to crystals, rose to the surface, colliding with each other and forming new relief shapes that were quickly destroyed. This process resembled an endless game of rocks, where each new island was as fragile as glass and could break apart under the influence of volcanic activity. Around 3 billion years ago, when this primary crust was forming, the surface temperature reached significant values, allowing magma flows to move and create new structures. Scientific research shows that at this time, the first continents were formed, but they bore no resemblance to our modern concepts of the Earth. These early continents were nothing more than accumulations of volcanic rock that periodically broke apart and disappeared, leaving no noticeable traces. As a result, the Earth's crust at that time was fragmented and unstable, consisting of numerous small blocks that floated on the surface of the hot magma, like ice cubes in boiling water. This formation process was extremely dynamic. Collisions between these blocks led to the formation of cracks, through which magma rose again, creating cycles of destruction and formation that continued for millions of years. Scientific data on the geological activity of that time show that as a result of such collisions, new volcanoes were formed, which later erupted magma and created new crusts. Around 2.5 billion years ago, when the crust began to stabilize, the first signs of continental drift appeared. But this was still a distant future. Destructive forces acting inside the planet continued to form and destroy the surface, creating a mosaic landscape completely different from today's. The primary crust created under conditions of constant heating and cooling was highly porous and contained many cracks, making it vulnerable to external influences. For example, the first continental material, known as cratons, was formed from these fragile sections. But this process was long and complex. Research shows that the first continental material began to form around 3 billion years ago. But these early continents were far from stable. Each new island formed, was eroded, was again destroyed and disappeared, leaving only brief traces of its existence. These processes laid the foundation for the further evolution of the Earth, but at that time, the reality was such that the surface remained in a state of constant change. The atmosphere of early Earth was a dense and opaque shroud of toxic gases that enveloped the planet, creating extremely unfavorable conditions for life. While the surface of Earth was heated to high temperatures, poisonous vapors rose from hot volcanoes and magma flows. These vapors consisted of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other volatile compounds, making the air toxic and unsuitable for breathing. Volcanic activity was at its peak, and each eruption from the craters filled the atmosphere with toxic particles, creating a continuous acid rain. Scientific research shows that during this period, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could reach 90%, leading to a greenhouse effect and irreversible changes in climatic conditions. There was virtually no free oxygen in the atmosphere, and this environment was deadly for modern forms of life. The absence of oxygen created conditions in which the vast majority of organisms could not survive. The dense veil of gases prevented sunlight from penetrating, plunging the planet into eternal twilight. Studying ancient mineral samples, scientists discovered that ultraviolet radiation reaching the surface was significantly absorbed by atmospheric components, creating harsh conditions for any potential biochemical activity. Additionally, the surface temperature could vary from 120 to 160 degrees Celsius, contributing to the formation of lava lakes and other extreme geological features. Scientific research conducted at the end of the 20th century showed that during this period, Earth was like a giant furnace, where chemical elements combined before our eyes. In this atmosphere, saturated with toxins, not only was there no oxygen, but the level of methane was also abnormally high, creating additional problems for any form of life that might have attempted to develop. Approximately 3,800 million years ago, when the process of photosynthesis began, the level of oxygen started to slowly increase. But until then, the atmosphere remained dark and hostile. These conditions formed not only the geological, but also the chemical foundation for the future evolution of life on Earth, creating the unique environment from which subsequently emerged oxygen-dependent organisms and, ultimately, multicellular beings. The process of degassing Earth was a monumental event that spanned millions of years and was responsible for the formation of the planet's gaseous envelope. Within the Earth, gases such as hydrogen, helium, carbon dioxide, and ammonia accumulated under high temperature and pressure. Volcanoes, acting like natural vents, provided an outlet for these gases, which gradually escaped to the surface through cracks in the crust. Volcanic eruptions were scenes of powerful gas outbursts as hot gases burst forth from the planet's interior, forming clouds of ash and smoke that rose into the atmosphere, creating the primitive atmosphere of Earth. These processes were not random. They occurred due to tectonic activity, when plates of the lithosphere moved, creating tension and cracks in the crust. With each volcanic eruption, it seemed as if the planet itself was exhaling its inner world, releasing gases that then mixed with the atmosphere. This degassing process was not only physical, but also chemical, as the released gases interacted with water vapor, forming clouds and creating conditions for the formation of the first oceans. Over millions of years, volcanic activity ensured a continuous supply of gases, which in turn influenced climate change and the creation of diverse ecosystems. Volcanoes like Kilimanjaro or the Eiffel volcano were not only sites of catastrophe, but also sources of life, creating conditions for the emergence of the first living organisms. Throughout Earth's history, starting from its formation, degassing remained a key process that influenced the planet's atmosphere and climate. As a result of this prolonged and complex degassing, by the end of the Archean period, Earth's atmosphere had significantly changed from its initial state. The oxygen content gradually increased, and by this time, conditions favorable to life had already emerged. Volcanic activity continued to play a crucial role in this process, acting as a catalyst for the creation of living ecosystems. In this context, volcanoes can be seen not only as destructive forces, but also as important components of Earth's atmospheric evolution. For example, the Krakatoa volcano erupted with such force in 1883 that its noise was heard over thousands of kilometers, and its ash formed clouds that darkened part of the Earth for many years. This degassing process, which lasted for millions of years, laid the foundation for the formation of conditions necessary for life on our planet. Volcanic gas emissions created an atmosphere in which simple organisms could exist and evolve, paving the way for further evolution. As the Earth cooled down from its early, fiery state, water vapor in the atmosphere began to condense. Over millions of years, this process resulted in endless downpours that fell from the sky and turned into powerful streams. This period, known as the Younger Oceanic Deluge, began to form around 4 billion years ago. The surface temperature dropped to a level where water vapor could turn into liquid. Rain fell continuously, creating vast water bodies and filling all the low-lying areas. Once started, this process lasted for thousands of years, leading to the formation of the first seas and oceans on Earth's surface. Water flowed down from the mountains, filling the depressions and creating new ecosystems that would later become homes for the simplest forms of life. According to scientists' estimates, by 3 billion years ago, about 70% of Earth's surface was covered by oceans. This period can be characterized as the wet era in the planet's history, when the new aquatic environment created conditions necessary for the emergence of life. The oceans formed during this time became not only sources of water, but also catalysts for chemical reactions that eventually led to the appearance of the first organisms. It is interesting to note that the very water that fell from the sky led to the creation of the complex ecosystems we know today. Understanding the formation of oceans and their role in the development of life on Earth underscores the significance of this process in the context of the planet's geological history. Currently, it is known that the deepest parts of the oceans, such as the Mariana Trench, reach depths of more than 10 kilometers, indicating their immense capacity and historical importance. Earth's early ocean, which existed more than 4 billion years ago, was an exotic and alarming world filled with minerals and organic compounds. The chemical composition of this primordial sea was shaped by volcanic activity as hot gases and minerals erupted through the Earth's crust. The water temperature then reached high values, sometimes exceeding 60 degrees Celsius, creating conditions for countless chemical reactions. This ocean, rich in metals such as iron, nickel, and copper, had an acidic reaction due to the dissolution of various minerals and the release of carbon dioxide. The composition of the early ocean was unique. It contained more dissolved substances than modern seas. It is believed that meteors enriched the water with organic molecules such as amino acids, which are the building blocks of life. These meteors fell from the sky, bringing essential elements that provided conditions for the emergence of the first living organisms. The ocean resembled a giant chemical laboratory where endless reactions between carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen occurred, creating complex molecules that could form the basis for biochemical processes. The color of this ocean was far from blue, as we are accustomed to seeing today. It varied from greenish to dirty brown, reflecting its rich chemical composition and the presence of suspended particles. The smell was sharp and pungent, likely due to high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and methane, creating an atmosphere that was intolerable for modern living beings. The water's consistency was thick and viscous, thanks to the large amount of organic substances and minerals, which distinguished it from the clear waters of modern seas. In this ocean, where conditions were so hostile, life was just beginning to awaken. There were primitive microbial forms of life capable of photosynthesis, which also altered the ocean's chemical composition by actively absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. This process became fundamental for the formation of the atmosphere we enjoy today. Research shows that early oceans were not only sources of water, but also cradles for the emergence of the first living organisms, which became the starting point for the evolution of all life forms on Earth. Studying these conditions helps us better understand how life could have originated in such extreme circumstances and how it adapted to changing environmental conditions. Studying the primary broth that existed in the ancient oceans of Earth reveals a captivating picture of chemical activity, which played a crucial role in the origin of life. This nutrient soup consisted of a complex mixture of various organic and inorganic substances, including amino acids, carbohydrates, and lipids, all necessary components for the formation of the first living organisms. Scientific research shows that over billions of years on Earth, numerous chemical reactions took place, and these reactions were significantly accelerated by various energy sources. Lightning, which frequently tore through the dark skies above the early oceans, created electrical discharges that facilitated the formation of complex molecules. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun, passing through the atmosphere, also contributed by breaking down simple molecules and promoting the formation of new compounds that could serve as the building blocks of life. Additionally, heat energy from hydrothermal sources on the ocean floor, where hot gases and minerals were expelled from the Earth's interior, created ideal conditions for chemical processes. These energy sources not only maintained high temperatures, but also provided the necessary chemical environment where reactions could occur with maximum intensity. As a result, a truly unique environment was created, one rich in nutrients that fostered chemical evolution. Scientific models based on geochemical data suggest that such an environment could have existed for millions of years, providing the necessary energy and resources for the formation of the first simple organisms. For millions of years, this broth remained under the influence of energy, ensuring continuous processes that ultimately led to the appearance of the first cells. In essence, the primary broth served as the arena where random combinations of molecules, under the influence of energy, could create new structures that subsequently evolved into more complex organisms. This concept, describing the conditions under which life could have originated, remains one of the most debated and researched topics in biology and geochemistry. Models based on these ideas are not just theoretical constructs, but also serve as the foundation for further research aimed at unraveling the mysteries of the origin of life on our planet. Hydrothermal sources on the floor of an ancient ocean represent unique ecosystems that serve as underwater oases of life. These sources are located at the boundaries of tectonic plates, where cracks in the ocean floor release hot, mineral-rich waters. The temperature of the water can reach up to 400 degrees Celsius, and the pressure at these depths exceeds hundreds of atmospheres. Around these sources, so-called black smokers form, These are mineral deposits that consist of clumps of sulfides and other compounds ejected by hot streams. These smokers can reach heights of several meters and resemble smoking columns enveloped in a cloud of hot steam and minerals. The main components contained in the water include sulfur, iron, zinc, and copper, which create complex chemical conditions. Due to the sharp gradient of temperature and concentration of various substances, unique ecosystems form around these sources, inhabited by organisms capable of surviving in extreme conditions. For example, bacteria that use sulfur as an energy source form the basis of the food chain in these underwater worlds. These microorganisms, known as chemosynthesizers, feed on chemical substances released from the sources and create biomass that supports the life of diverse marine organisms such as tube worms, mollusks, and crustaceans. The uniqueness of these hydrothermal sources lies not only in their biological diversity, but also in the fact that they can serve as a model for understanding the origin of life on Earth. Many scientists, such as Dr. John Barr and Dr. Elizabeth Taylor, have proposed that life could have originated in such conditions. Research indicates that sources like these could have provided the necessary chemical reactions that facilitated the formation of organic molecules, enabling the development of more complex organisms. Hydrothermal sources also play a crucial role in geochemical processes on Earth. They contribute a significant amount of minerals to ocean water, influencing its composition and, consequently, the planet's climate system. 80% of all magnesium and calcium in the oceans comes from such sources. This process can affect global climate changes because the composition of ocean water is directly linked to the planet's carbon cycle. Hydrothermal sources located on the ocean floor are among the most mysterious and least studied areas on our planet. They are located at depths of more than 3,000 meters and remain inaccessible to most researchers. However, modern technologies such as autonomous underwater vehicles and deep-sea submersibles allow scientists to study these unique ecosystems and their impact on life on Earth. In the 21st century, more than 100 hydrothermal systems have been explored, including famous sites such as the sources on the Galapagos Islands and in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge area. The unique chemical environment around hydrothermal sources, as well as their high biological productivity, makes them the true cradle of life on the planet. These places are not only home to many unique species, but also hold the keys to understanding the evolution of life on Earth. The formation of the first organic molecules in the ocean was one of the most mysterious and pivotal moments in the history of life on Earth. The initial chemical environment on our planet, around 4 billion years ago, consisted mainly of simple gases such as hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, dissolved in oceans formed as a result of volcanic activity and water vapor condensation. In this primordial soup, complex reactions took place, initiated by the effects of ultraviolet radiation, electrical discharges, and heat from volcanoes. In the 1930s, in the famous experiment by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, scientists demonstrated that simple gases in the atmosphere could produce amino acids, building blocks of proteins. In the process of chemical evolution, molecules began to interact with each other, forming more complex structures. The formation of the first simplest organic compounds, such as sugars and amino acids, became possible due to processes occurring in oceans under the influence of external factors. These molecules, due to their chemical structure, began to exhibit a tendency towards self-organization. Simple molecules aggregated into more complex structures, creating stable forms such as polymers. For example, amino acid molecules could combine to form peptides and then proteins. A significant stage in this process was the formation of lipids, which in turn began to form primitive cell membranes. These membranes created microenvironments, allowing molecules within them to interact more effectively. Over time, some of these molecules, possessing the property of replication, became the ancestors of the first living organisms. By 4 billion years ago, the oceans already contained conditions favorable for the formation of more complex organic molecules. At this time, simple organic compounds could spontaneously form structures that later became the basis for further life development. Research shows that molecules such as ribonucleic acids, RNA, could function not only as information carriers but also as catalysts for chemical reactions. This discovery allowed for the hypothesis that life could have originated from RNA, which became the basis for the primordial soup hypothesis. In the end, all these chemical processes led to the formation of the first living organisms, which began to develop and evolve around 3.5 billion years ago. These early forms of life were likely single-celled prokaryotes that inhabited marine waters, utilized available resources, and began to occupy different niches, laying the foundation for the future diversity of life on Earth. Scientific research continues to confirm that it was in these oceans that the history of life began, which ultimately led to the appearance of all known organisms. One of the most significant discoveries was that molecules capable of self-organization became fundamental in the process of evolution. The study of self-replicating molecules opens up a fascinating world of chemistry, where certain structures have acquired a unique ability to create copies of themselves using available materials around them. These molecules act as the first seeds of life, striving for self-replication and spread. The appearance of such structures marks a critical transition from chemical evolution to biological evolution, as they provided the foundation for more complex forms of life. During self-replication, molecules can interact with other chemical substances, gathering necessary components from the surrounding environment. This interaction is not random. It is subject to natural selection, which promotes the evolution of more efficient and robust structures. Simultaneously, these molecules exhibit remarkable flexibility, adapting to changing environmental conditions, which allows them to survive and thrive. For instance, in conditions of limited resources, molecules can optimize their copies, ensuring their survival under stress. This phenomenon can be seen as a precursor to biological processes that later led to the formation of cells. A key aspect of self-replicating molecules is their ability to change and adapt. For example, under certain conditions, they can modify their structure, opening up new possibilities for evolution. Scientific experiments conducted in laboratories confirm that even simple molecules can evolve into complex structures, underscoring the importance of this process. These molecules do not simply copy themselves. They can create various variants, contributing to the emergence of diversity, a key element of evolution. In this context, self-replicating molecules become not only building blocks for more complex forms of life, but also symbols of the transition from simple chemical reactions to complex biological systems. Research indicates that such molecules could have existed in the conditions of primitive Earth, where the combination of chemical elements created ideal conditions for their formation and evolution. The appearance of self-replicating structures became possible due to specific chemical reactions that occurred in aqueous solutions, where molecules could easily interact with each other. During these reactions, chains formed that could break and reform, creating numerous variations of the molecules themselves. This phenomenon played a crucial role in the further development of life on the planet. It is believed that these molecules formed the basis for the first cells, which later evolved into more complex organisms. Self-replicating molecules represent not just an interesting aspect of chemistry, but also a key element in understanding how life could have arisen on Earth. They demonstrate how simple chemical reactions can lead to the formation of complex systems, which form the basis for all life on the planet. The formation of the first cellular membranes was a crucial stage in the evolution of life on Earth. Primitive molecules, such as phospholipids, began to self-assemble into thin films due to their unique chemical properties. Phospholipids have two parts: hydrophobic tails that repel water and hydrophilic heads that attract water. This duality causes the molecules to aggregate their tails inward, forming structures similar to bubbles that protect the internal contents from the external environment. These simple membranes, known as liposomes, were capable of isolating chemical reactions occurring within them from the surrounding world. In the early conditions of Earth, such cellular membranes could form spontaneously through the self-assembly of molecules in an aqueous environment, possibly near hot springs or in oceanic shelves where conditions favored the formation of these primitive structures. They not only provided protection, but also created a microsphere in which more complex chemical reactions could occur. As the concentration of molecules within the membranes increased, the speed and efficiency of these reactions also increased, accelerating the rate of evolution. Membranes could grow, divide, and fuse with other membranes, forming more complex structures. This process could be initiated by various factors such as changes in temperature or pH, allowing bubbles to combine into larger structures capable of exchanging substances. Research indicates that such self-assembly and fusion processes could have occurred more than 3.5 billion years ago when life first emerged on Earth. These primitive membrane structures became the precursors of cells, which in turn formed the basis for all living organisms on the planet. The appearance of membrane systems allowed for the concentration of chemical reactions in a confined space, which was critically important for accelerating evolutionary processes. Such membranes provided an organized structure in which more complex biochemical processes could develop and become more intricate, necessary for the emergence of the first living cells. Approximately 3.5 billion years ago, the first prokaryotic cells appeared on Earth. These were simple, single-celled organisms lacking nuclei and complex internal structures. These tiny organisms, ranging in size from 1 to 10 micrometers, formed the basis for all subsequent life on the planet. Their structure was remarkably simple. Prokaryotes possessed a cell membrane and a cell wall containing peptidoglycan, which provided protection and shape. Inside the cell, there was a ribosomal complex responsible for protein synthesis, and a circular DNA molecule that freely floated in the cytoplasm, as there was no nucleus, as in more complex eukaryotes. These simple organisms reproduced by binary fission, allowing them to quickly increase their numbers in suitable conditions, warm seas and oceans, where they could use solar energy for photosynthesis or consume organic matter from the surrounding environment. Prokaryotes not only fed, but also grew, utilizing available resources, which allowed them to adapt to changing conditions. For example, cyanobacteria, one of the most well-known groups of prokaryotes, could produce oxygen during photosynthesis, contributing to the formation of an atmosphere suitable for other organisms. The remarkable resilience of prokaryotes was evident in their ability to survive in extreme conditions, from hot springs to salty lakes, where many other organisms could not exist. These microorganisms, capable of metabolism in the absence of oxygen and high temperatures, played a key role in shaping the ecosystems of early Earth. Thanks to their ability to adapt and the diversity of their metabolic pathways, prokaryotes were able to colonize almost every corner of the planet, including the most hostile environments. Prokaryotes have remained the foundation of food chains, providing nutrients for more complex forms of life. They not only survived, but also became the driving force behind biochemical processes that defined the evolution of all living beings. As a result of their activity on Earth, conditions were created that favored the emergence and development of more complex organisms. Prokaryotes established the first ecosystems, which laid the groundwork for future biospheres. Stromatolites are among the oldest evidence of life on Earth, representing layered structures formed by colonies of microorganisms, primarily cyanobacteria. These organisms, aggregating into mats, began capturing sedimentary particles, gradually forming characteristic domes and columns that can reach several meters in height. Each such formation is not merely the result of random processes, but the outcome of millennia, if not thousands, of work by microscopic beings. Stromatolites grow extremely slowly, layer by layer, and this process reflects the passage of time, much like the annual rings in tree trunks. In stable environments, typically in shallow seas, these mats create unique ecosystems, providing habitats for other organisms. The formation of stromatolites occurs due to the photosynthetic activity of cyanobacteria, which produce oxygen, thereby facilitating the oxidation of iron and the formation of significant carbonate calcium deposits. These processes also play a significant role in biogeochemical cycles, influencing the composition of the atmosphere and oceans. Research indicates that stromatolites can grow in shallow waters only in conditions of low competition from other organisms, such as marine grasses and mollusk shells. As a result, in places where stromatolites are still forming, unique ecosystems with high biodiversity are observed. It is interesting to note that stromatolites can vary in shape and size depending on the conditions of the surrounding environment, including salinity, temperature, and light availability. Some stromatolites have the shape of domes, others of layered plates, and all of them serve as evidence of the ancient history of our planet, sometimes reaching ages of billions of years. These formations allow scientists to look into the past, studying how life on Earth evolved and adapted to changing conditions. Research on stromatolites also helps to understand how organisms could survive in conditions that today seem extreme. In some ecosystems where stromatolites continue to form, unique conditions allow microorganisms to thrive, despite high levels of salinity and other stress factors. It is important to note that stromatolites are not only indicators of ancient ecosystems, but also play a key role in modern ecosystems, continuing to serve as homes for many species of organisms. There are specific examples of modern analogues of stromatolites that can be observed in places like Australian water bodies, where colonies of cyanobacteria continue to form their layered structures, indicating the resilience of these ancient forms of life to changes in the environment. Stromatolites represent not only geological interest, but also biological value, as they help us better understand how life on Earth has adapted to various ecological conditions over billions of years. Shark Bay in Australia is a unique place where stromatolites, living fossils, create amazing structures similar to those that existed on Earth billions of years ago. This bay, located on the coast of Western Australia, is renowned for its high salt concentrations and shallow water bodies, where clear water allows the observation of spherical domes and columns formed by colonies of cyanobacteria. These bacteria, which live here, continue a process that began over 3 billion years ago when the first forms of life began to colonize land and oceans. In Shark Bay, stromatolites grow slowly, adding less than 1 millimeter per year, making their study particularly valuable for scientists seeking to look into the distant past of our planet. In this bay, one can see stromatolites that are multi-layered structures formed by deposits captured by bacteria, creating unique conditions for the preservation of these ancient forms of life. From an ecosystem perspective, these stromatolites serve as homes for numerous microorganisms that live in symbiosis with cyanobacteria, forming complex ecosystems. In 1983, Shark Bay was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List due to its unique natural formations and biodiversity. This place attracts not only scientists, but also tourists who can observe the growth process of stromatolites, which has been ongoing for millions of years. The unique conditions of the bay, including warm and salty water, create an ideal environment for cyanobacteria that have survived and adapted to these conditions, maintaining their viability for billions of years. The stromatolites of Shark Bay are important witnesses to the evolution of life on Earth, as they were the first organisms to produce oxygen, ultimately leading to the development of Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. The height of stromatolites can reach several meters, making them not only interesting from a biological perspective, but also impressive from an aesthetic standpoint. These structures continue to grow and change, leaving traces that can tell us about the climatic conditions and changes that have occurred on Earth over millions of years. Shark Bay is an underwater laboratory where scientists can study important aspects of biogeochemistry and ecology that were relevant during the early stages of our planet's formation. Photosynthesis is an extraordinary process that has become the foundation of life on Earth. It enables living organisms to convert solar energy into chemical energy, creating nutrients from simple compounds such as carbon dioxide and water. This process evolved over more than 2.5 billion years ago when the first organisms began to use sunlight. Their ability to capture light waves and convert them into energy served as a catalyst for evolutionary changes that led to the creation of more complex forms of life. Initially, these were simple single-celled organisms that used solar radiation to produce organic substances and release oxygen into the atmosphere. This oxygen, which was virtually absent before photosynthesis, became a key element for the development of multicellular organisms. By the time plants appeared, photosynthesis had already drastically altered the chemistry of the atmosphere, creating conditions necessary for life as we know it today. As a result, the level of oxygen in the atmosphere reached approximately 21%, opening the door for the emergence of animals and, ultimately, humans. The complex system of photosynthetic processes allowed plants and algae not only to survive, but also to thrive in the most diverse conditions, from tropical forests to polar regions. This process also became the basis of food chains, providing nourishment for most living beings on the planet. It is important to note that photosynthesis not only created conditions for life, but also became the main factor regulating the climate on Earth. Changes in the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen caused by photosynthetic organisms directly affect global temperatures and weather conditions. This process, in essence, is one of the most magnificent evolutionary discoveries, which not only altered the composition of our atmosphere, but also led to the emergence of ecosystems that exist today. As a result of photosynthesis on Earth, there appeared colourful forests, vast steppes, and diverse marine ecosystems that continue to support life in its various forms. With each sunny day, photosynthesis continues to fulfill its role, producing billions of tons of oxygen and organic compounds, sustaining life on the planet. Depending on the conditions of the surrounding environment, the speed of photosynthesis can vary. It occurs faster in the tropics than in colder regions. Interestingly, under optimal conditions, one plant can produce up to 30 tons of oxygen per year. This makes photosynthesis not only important for individual organisms, but also critically necessary for the entire biosphere. Cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, appeared on Earth approximately 3.5 billion years ago and became the first organisms to use solar energy for photosynthesis, producing oxygen. These microscopic creatures, with their unique ability to convert sunlight into chemical energy, became the main drivers of the oxygen revolution on our planet. In ancient shallow waters, such as those found in modern oceans, vast colonies of cyanobacteria formed, colouring the water in vivid blue-green hues. Thanks to their pigments, such as chlorophyll, they can effectively capture sunlight, allowing them to produce organic matter from carbon dioxide and water. During photosynthesis, cyanobacteria release oxygen as a byproduct, gradually altering the chemical composition of Earth's atmosphere over millions of years. According to research conducted by scientists from the University of Cambridge around 2 billion years ago, the oxygen content in the atmosphere significantly increased due to the activities of these microorganisms, creating conditions for the emergence of more complex forms of life. These tiny organisms, which are only a few micrometers in size, worked tirelessly, forming stromatolites, ancient structures composed of layers of sediment and cyanobacteria. Stromatolites found in places like Australia serve as evidence of their extensive activity and can be up to 3 billion years old. Scientists also note that cyanobacteria not only produced oxygen, but also laid the foundation for the nitrogen cycle, enabling other organisms, including plants and animals, to develop and evolve. These microscopic organisms, invisible to the naked eye, produce up to 40% of the oxygen we breathe today. They continue to inhabit various ecosystems, from oceans to freshwater bodies, and even in extreme conditions such as hot springs and Arctic ice. Their resilience and adaptability make cyanobacteria a significant subject of study in biology and ecology, as they may hold the key to understanding how life on Earth adapts to climate change. These ancient organisms forever changed the face of our planet, creating an atmosphere in which we can exist. As a result of their multi-million-year work, the oxygen content in the atmosphere reached around 21%, becoming the basis for the respiration of all aerobic organisms. The oxygen catastrophe was one of the most significant events in Earth's history, transforming the planet's atmosphere and oceans. The accumulation of oxygen in the atmosphere, driven by the activities of cyanobacteria, was a true revolution. But for many organisms of the time, it was a real tragedy. Oxygen, which is now considered essential for life, was a toxic substance for anaerobic organisms that thrived in anoxic environments. These primitive creatures adapted to conditions with very little oxygen, and any traces of it were perceived as a mortal threat. While cyanobacteria, through photosynthesis, created conditions for future life, their actions had catastrophic consequences for existing ecosystems. This paradoxical change in atmospheric chemistry can be compared to the discovery of a toxic gas that, on one hand, became the basis for the respiration of most modern organisms, and on the other, caused mass extinctions of those unable to adapt. As a result of this change, many organisms, such as archaea and bacteria, found themselves on the brink of extinction. Oxygen oxidized organic compounds, destroying cellular structures and inhibiting metabolism. This led to the inability of many species to survive in the new environment, while those that did manage to survive began a long and difficult adaptation to the new conditions. One can imagine the panic and chaos in the underwater world as life based on anaerobic processes rapidly disappeared. Nature always finds a way to change, but this transition was a real test for many forms of life. As a result of this process, new ecosystems based on aerobic respiration emerged on Earth, which in turn became the foundation for more complex forms of life, including animals and plants that we know today. This dramatic turn in the history of life on the planet opened the door to evolutionary diversity, which we observe today. Ultimately, the oxygen catastrophe led to the transformation of Earth's atmosphere, making oxygen not only an essential element for life, but also a catalyst for the emergence of new ecosystems. Over millions of years, this gas became an integral part of our existence. But its initial impact was devastating for many of the planet's inhabitants. The oxygen content in the atmosphere reached around 21%, becoming the basis for the respiration of all aerobic organisms. During the oxygen catastrophe that began approximately 2.5 billion years ago, significant chemical changes occurred in the oceans, primarily due to the oxidation of dissolved iron. As the level of oxygen in the atmosphere began to rise, it reacted with iron dissolved in seawater, forming iron oxides. This reaction took place at the depths of ancient oceans, where iron, in the form of ions, interacted with oxygen molecules. As a result, precipitates formed that gradually settled to the ocean floor, creating characteristic banded iron formations. These layers, known as banded iron formations, BIF, are red-striped deposits consisting of alternating layers of iron oxides and silicates. They formed over millions of years and are a clear indication of how the chemical composition of the oceans changed in response to the increasing level of oxygen. Estimates suggest that such deposits began to form around 2.5 billion years ago and continued until about 1 billion years ago, when oxygen became abundant. As a result of these processes, the color of the oceans also changed. Initially, the waters of ancient seas had a greenish or greyish tint due to the presence of dissolved iron and other elements. However, as oxygen interacted with iron and precipitated it as oxides, the oceans gradually became more transparent and blue, as we know them today. This change reflects not only chemical transformations, but also the evolution of ecosystems that adapted to the new conditions. The banded iron formations we can observe today contain records of these ancient processes, and their analysis allows scientists to understand how the oxygen catastrophe changed not only the composition of the atmosphere, but also the appearance of our planet, including its water resources. Scientific research shows that these deposits contain a significant amount of iron, estimated to be around 50 million tons per square kilometre, making them an important indicator for geologists and paleontologists studying the history of Earth. The adaptation of life to an oxygen-rich atmosphere led to incredible changes in Earth's ecosystems, resulting in the emergence of entirely new forms of life. Some organisms, such as bacteria of the genus Deinococcus, developed powerful protective mechanisms against the destructive effects of oxygen. These microorganisms can survive in conditions of high radiation levels and oxidative stress, making them true champions of adaptation. They have evolved special proteins that help repair damaged DNA, as well as antioxidants that neutralize free radicals. Meanwhile, other organisms, such as cyanobacteria, learned to use oxygen in their metabolic processes. These single-celled organisms not only began to photosynthesize, producing oxygen as a byproduct, but also became the foundation for the formation of the planet's oxygen atmosphere. Around 2.5 billion years ago, during the period known as the oxygen catastrophe, cyanobacteria released so much oxygen that it became the dominant gas in the atmosphere. This led to a great adaptive radiation, when multicellular organisms capable of thriving in these new conditions emerged. An example of this is the development of algae, which became an important part of ecosystems, providing oxygen for other organisms. Ancient multicellular organisms, such as fungi and animals, began to evolve in conditions where oxygen became a vital component. Around 600 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, the first complex multicellular organisms, such as Dickinsonia, appeared, reaching sizes of up to 1 meter and able to feed by diffusing oxygen through their bodies. This evolution led to the appearance of more complex and energy-efficient organisms, such as trilobites and early vertebrates. Oxygen not only became a source of energy, but also a crucial factor in the development of new forms of life that used it for breathing and metabolism. As a result of these changes, Earth's ecosystems became much more diverse and complex. An example of this is the existence of modern forests, which depend on oxygen produced by plants and provide habitat for millions of animal species. Remarkably, it was this adaptation to an oxygen-rich atmosphere that paved the way for the emergence of more complex forms of life capable of active activity and interaction within ecosystems. Ultimately, this process became the basis for the formation of the biosphere as we know it today, where oxygen is the key element for supporting life. Eukaryotic cells represent a more complex type of cell that serves as the foundation for all multicellular organisms on Earth. These cells, which emerged approximately 1.8 billion years ago, possess a unique structure that includes a nucleus containing genetic material and various internal structures performing specialized functions. One can imagine eukaryotic cells as miniature cities where each building performs a unique task. In these cities, there are factories that produce necessary substances such as proteins, as well as control centers that coordinate processes, regulating when and how chemical reactions should occur. For example, in these cells, processes such as metabolism, growth, and division take place, which require precise adjustment and coordination. This is made possible by a complex signaling system that allows cells to respond to changes in their environment. The appearance of eukaryotic cells marked a revolutionary leap in the complexity of living systems, as they were able to develop more complex organisms, including plants, fungi, and animals. Eukaryotes are capable of multicellularity, which opened new horizons for evolution. One of the key features of eukaryotes is the ability of their cells to specializedly combine into tissues, allowing the organism to function as a whole. This leads to the formation of complex systems such as the nervous system in animals or photosynthetic tissues in plants. A significant aspect is that eukaryotic cells have the ability to exchange genetic information through sexual reproduction, which increases genetic diversity and allows adaptation to changes in the environment. These cells, with their complex organization and capabilities, became the basis for the emergence of all higher forms of life, including humans. Eukaryotes facilitated the transition from simple unicellular organisms to complex ecosystems where interaction between different species plays a key role. Their evolution led to the appearance on Earth of numerous forms of life capable of adapting to the most diverse conditions, from deep oceans to arid deserts. Eukaryotic cells, with their high degree of organization and specialized functions, ensured the stability and diversity of living systems, and their emergence became one of the most important stages in the history of life on the planet. These cells are capable of metabolic exchange, allowing them to efficiently use available resources. Eukaryotes represent not just more complex cells, but an entire evolutionary branch that led to the emergence of the diversity of species inhabiting our planet. Eukaryotes not only provided a higher level of organization, but also contributed to the formation of complex ecosystems where each link is important for maintaining the overall balance. The theory of endosymbiosis, proposed in the 20th century by scientists such as Lynn Margulis, explains the origin of mitochondria as a result of a symbiotic interaction between ancient bacteria and larger cells. Around 1,500 million years ago, during the archaic period of Earth's history, the microbial world was inhabited by primitive prokaryotes lacking complex internal structures. However, among them, there were bacteria capable of aerobic respiration, using oxygen to obtain energy. These organisms, such as alpha proteobacteria, were highly efficient in converting chemical energy, allowing them to survive in conditions of increasing oxygen content in the atmosphere, caused by the photosynthesis of cyanobacteria. At some point, it is likely that an event occurred where such an aerobic bacterium was engulfed by a larger anaerobic cell. Instead of being digested, this bacterium remained inside, forming a symbiotic union. Notably, this process was not one-sided. Both parties benefited. The larger cell provided the bacterium with protection and nutrients, while the bacterium, acting as an energy station, supplied the cell with necessary energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This symbiosis became the basis for the emergence of eukaryotic cells, which later led to the development of multicellular organisms. Remarkably, mitochondria retained their own DNA, which differs from nuclear DNA and is more similar to bacterial DNA. This DNA, circular and containing around 37 genes, is a direct testament to their bacterial origin. Furthermore, mitochondria can reproduce independently of the cell, indicating their original independence. This extraordinary symbiosis became the foundation for the evolution of complex organisms, enabling them to adapt to diverse conditions and develop into complex ecosystems. As a result of this process, organisms with highly developed metabolic pathways appeared on the planet. The endosymbiotic theory not only explains the origin of mitochondria, but also sheds light on important aspects of evolution, demonstrating how the interaction of various species can lead to the creation of new forms of life. Mitochondria, in turn, continue to perform their function in all eukaryotic cells, including human cells, where they play a key role in energy production. Chloroplasts, like mitochondria, originated as a result of the process of endosymbiosis, but with the participation of photosynthesizing cyanobacteria, which became internal organelles of eukaryotic cells. This event occurred approximately 1 billion years ago, when eukaryotes began to ingest cyanobacteria, providing themselves with energy from sunlight. Cyanobacteria, with their ability to photosynthesize, converted solar energy into chemical energy, synthesizing carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water. This exchange was beneficial. Eukaryotes gained access to energy, while cyanobacteria found protection and a nutrient-rich environment within the cells. This symbiotic union led to significant changes in Earth's ecosystems, as it was this interaction that gave rise to primary algae, which became the ancestors of all plants. Algae, in turn, began to populate the oceans, creating an oxygen-rich atmosphere, which paved the way for life on land. Over time, chloroplasts integrated into cellular structures, adapted to various conditions, and became the primary producers of oxygen and organic compounds essential for life on Earth. The unique ability of chloroplasts to photosynthesize formed the basis of food chains in most ecosystems, providing not only plants but also animals, including humans, with vital resources. Chloroplasts, as internal solar batteries, are capable of converting solar energy into chemical energy, which is the basis for the existence of all photosynthetic organisms. Currently, scientists have identified more than 15,000 species of algae, each playing its role in the biosphere of the planet. Multicellularity is one of the most significant stages in the development of life on Earth, occurring approximately 600 million years ago during the Ediacaran period. This transition from single cells to colonies, and then to true multicellular organisms with differentiated tissues, was a true revolution. Initially, individual cells, like independent citizens, existed in their own world, but over time they began to unite, forming colonies where each cell realized that together they could achieve more. This process can be likened to the formation of a society where individual interests give way to the common good. Specialization of cells in multicellular organisms allows each cell to perform its unique role, whether it be transporting substances, protection, or energy production. For example, in highly organized systems such as animals, cells can specialize in performing tasks, leading to more efficient use of resources. This is akin to a society where people focus on what they do best, whether it's construction, medicine, or agriculture. Such an approach to organizing life not only saves resources, but also provides protection from hostile environments. Multicellular organisms adapt better to changing life conditions, as the united cells can coordinate their actions and react to threats more effectively. Throughout evolution, multicellular organisms developed complex communication systems between cells, ensuring synchronization in actions and improving survival. For instance, cellular signaling mechanisms, such as the release of chemical substances, allow cells to exchange information and respond to changes in the surrounding environment. Multicellularity also opens doors to the formation of complex ecosystems where organisms of different types can interact and depend on each other. This process led to the emergence of various forms of life, including plants, fungi, and animals, each of which developed its unique strategies for survival and reproduction. For example, multicellular organisms can create specialized organs such as hearts or leaves, allowing them to perform functions that single cells cannot. As a result, multicellularity not only changed the very nature of life, but also created conditions for the emergence of diversity in forms and functions that we observe today. The scientific community continues to study multicellularity, investigating questions such as its origin and reasons for success in various ecosystems. One of the researchers in this field is Dr. Emilio Labranca, who studied how early multicellular organisms adapted to different environmental conditions, which may provide insights into the evolution of multicellularity. Multicellularity, as a result of evolution, becomes one of the key factors determining biological diversity on the planet, allowing life forms to adapt and survive in the most varied conditions. The Ediacaran biota, which existed approximately from 600 to 500 million years ago, represents one of the earliest complex multicellular organisms on Earth. These creatures, which inhabited ancient oceans, had a form unlike modern animals, placing them in a unique category in the history of life. They possessed soft bodies without a hard skeleton and often had disc-like, feather-like, or mat-like shapes with a distinctive pattern, creating an impression of mysterious and whimsical beauty. For example, the well-known species Dickinsonia, which could reach a length of up to 1 meter, had a flat, oval body with characteristic segmented stripes resembling a ridged surface. These organisms led a slow-paced life, attaching themselves to the seabed and absorbing nutrients from water or sediment. They were not active predators and did not use complex mechanisms for food capture, indicating that their ecology was relatively simple and depended on passive filtration feeding. The Ediacaran biota inhabited shallow seas, and their discovery on various continents such as Australia, Canada, and Russia indicates their wide distribution. The diversity of shapes and sizes raises many questions. Scientists still cannot definitively classify them into known groups of organisms, such as animals or plants. For instance, some researchers, like Dr. Gregory Rattelak from the Australian National University, suggest that some of these creatures could have been ancestors of modern jellyfish or even chordates. However, despite numerous theories, most characteristics of the Ediacaran biota remain a mystery. Some species, such as Charnia, had a structure resembling leaves, which challenges their classification. Scientists also note that, unlike most multicellular organisms, Ediacarans lacked clear symmetry, making their study even more complex. These ancient creatures, with their peculiar forms and mysterious nature, serve as important evidence of how life on Earth might have looked at the dawn of multicellular evolution. They left behind fossils that provide insight into the structure and diversity of their bodies. But they are still full of mysteries. The Ediacaran biota, with their unique features, opens doors to the past, which still hides many unsolved enigmas. Today, known fossils of Ediacarans, such as those found in the Ediacara Formation in Australia, remain evidence of their existence and diversity. The Cambrian explosion, which occurred approximately 500 million years ago, was one of the most significant periods in the history of life on Earth. Within a relatively short time frame, around 20 million years, new types of animals appeared in the oceans, becoming the ancestors of almost all modern groups. This period can be called a true experiment in evolution, where nature, like an artist, tested various forms and survival strategies. The oceans filled with creatures with shells, claws, and jaws, which not only transformed ecosystems, but also laid the foundation for future biological diversity. Among the main groups that emerged during this period were the ancestors of arthropods, mollusks, and chordates. The most important finds from this time are fossils discovered in the Burgess Formation in Canada and the Chengjiang Formation in China, where remarkable organisms such as arthropods with complex anatomical structures and paddle-like fins for swimming were found. Here, the famous trilobite fossils were also discovered, which, due to their hard exoskeletons, became some of the first successful marine creatures. These animals, which appeared during the Cambrian period, demonstrated a wide range of forms, from simple organisms to more complex forms capable of hunting and defending themselves. The appearance of predators like Anomalocaris, with their powerful jaws and complex eyes, changed the rules of the game in the oceans, forcing other animals to adapt or perish. During this time, the first ecosystems also developed, where various species began to interact with each other, forming food chains that became the basis for further life development. Complex life forms, such as brachiopods and echinoderms, filled the marine spaces, and their diversity is astonishing. Oceans, which were once home to simple organisms, became the stage for endless experiments with forms and functions. In this context, the Cambrian explosion was not just a period of increased species diversity, but a time of revolutionary changes in biology, where each new form of life opened up new possibilities for survival, adaptation, and evolution. As a result of this explosion of diversity on the planet, organisms with various hunting and defense strategies emerged, leading to the formation of more complex ecosystems and interactions. According to scientists, more than 50 new animal groups emerged during the Cambrian period, making it one of the most innovative periods in the history of life on Earth. The Burgess Shale is a unique fossil deposit located in British Columbia, Canada, which has provided an unprecedented window into Cambrian life. First discovered in 1930 by geologists exploring the Rocky Mountains, this deposit contains exceptional fossils. The conditions under which these fossils formed were extraordinary. A deep-sea environment with low oxygen content allowed for the preservation not only of hard parts of organisms, but also of their soft tissues. This discovery opened up new avenues for studying early life on Earth. Over 500 fossil species have been found in the Burgess Shale, including unique organisms like Anomalocaris, a predator up to 40 centimeters long with numerous complex eyes and a segmented body. These findings challenge traditional notions of early life forms, as many of them lack modern counterparts. For instance, the trilobites found here, with their complex morphology and diverse body forms, are a source of wonder for researchers. Some of these trilobites had long spines and unusual shell shapes that may have served protective and predatory functions. The Burgess Shale also contains remarkable organisms like Morella, ancient marine creatures that exhibit complex evolutionary adaptations. These discoveries have fundamentally altered our understanding of early animal evolution, revealing that during the Cambrian period, Earth was home to highly organized and diverse ecosystems. Research by scientists such as David Edwards and Nathan Link underscores the importance of the Burgess Shale for understanding the biological history of Earth. Scientists have not only reconstructed the morphology of these creatures, but also studied their behavior and ecological niches, making the Burgess Shale a vital object of paleontological research. The study of these fossils has led to the identification of new animal groups, such as Halimeda, which exhibit unique characteristics not seen in other groups. These findings have also contributed to new theories on the origin of multicellular organisms, reshaping the scientific landscape in paleontology. The Burgess Shale is not only a treasure trove of unique fossils, but also a key to unraveling questions about how life on Earth evolved during early geological epochs. With each new discovery, the Burgess Shale continues to amaze scientists and expand our understanding of evolution, remaining one of the most significant paleontological finds of the 20th century. The Paleozoic era spanned a period from approximately 600 million to 250 million years ago and is one of the most significant stages in Earth's history, during which the foundations of modern biodiversity were laid. This period was characterized by the progressive complexity of ecosystems, as evidenced by the emergence of new ecological niches. Life on the planet underwent a revolution. Multicellular organisms evolved and adapted to various conditions, leading to the formation of diverse groups. The expansion of life from aquatic environments to land became possible due to numerous evolutionary innovations, such as the development of a hard skeleton in vertebrates and the appearance of the first terrestrial plants. As organisms began to colonize land, they developed new ways of obtaining energy and protection from adverse conditions, contributing to the formation of complex ecosystems. A significant event in this era was the appearance of the first forests, which were formed by higher spore plants like ferns and horsetails. These primitive forests became habitats for various insect species and other animals that began to colonize terrestrial ecosystems. At this time, the first predatory species also appeared, adding new levels of interaction within ecosystems. Complex food chains began to form as organisms competed for resources, leading to natural selection and evolutionary changes. An important step was the appearance of amphibians, which were the first vertebrates to leave the aquatic environment, opening new horizons for further evolution. These early amphibians, such as Ichthyostega, were able to adapt to life on land, but still depended on water for reproduction. The Paleozoic era also witnessed the appearance of the first reptiles, which were able to fully transition to a terrestrial lifestyle, marking a significant step in the formation of the ecosystems we know today. The diversity of life continued to grow, and ecosystems became increasingly complex and interconnected. As a result of climate changes and geological processes on Earth, mass extinctions occurred, but they also opened new opportunities for evolution and adaptation. By the end of the Paleozoic era, life on Earth reached unprecedented diversity, which became the basis for further development of the biosphere. The Paleozoic era ended around 250 million years ago, leaving behind a rich legacy in the form of fossils that continue to amaze and inspire scientists around the world. The Silurian period, which lasted from 430 to 400 million years ago, was a significant milestone in Earth's history, marked by the appearance of the first land plants. These primitive organisms, such as mosses and lichens, began to colonize the land, rising above the moist soil of ancient ocean shores. They were low-growing green stems, lacking roots and leaves, like the vanguard of a great land conquest. The first land plants had to adapt to entirely new conditions, where they had to survive without the ability to extract water and nutrients from the soil. Instead, they developed mechanisms to retain water, such as reducing evaporation through protective structures on the surface of their cells. These pioneers, growing on moist soil, faced the challenge of protecting themselves from drying out, which was a significant test for their existence. The first land plants used spores for reproduction, allowing them to spread actively across new territories, even without dependence on water. These spores were incredibly resistant to external conditions, enabling them to wait for suitable conditions to germinate, sometimes for decades. Each plant became part of a complex ecosystem where they interacted with each other and with their environment. For example, mosses, with their ability to photosynthesize, began to convert solar energy into nutrients, creating the foundation for food chains in new ecosystems. The Silurian period also saw the emergence of the first vascular plants, which developed systems for transporting water and nutrients, allowing them to grow taller and occupy more diverse ecosystems. Among these plants were the Silophytes, which gradually evolved into more complex forms of life. These plants could reach heights of up to 2 meters and, with their vascular systems, became competitive in the struggle for light and space. Their appearance was a true revolution in the plant world, opening new horizons for the evolution of flora. The Silurian period was a turning point in the biosphere, when land plants not only adapted but also began to alter their surroundings. They became a source of oxygen, necessary for the survival of other forms of life, and began to create soils that would later become the basis for more complex ecosystems. The appearance of the first land plants marked the beginning of a new era on Earth, when life began to actively colonize the land, and this journey was just beginning. The Silurian period witnessed the first steps of plants on land, which paved the way for the appearance of forests, fields, and diverse ecosystems that we know today. It is important to note that it was during this period that conditions began to form, allowing animals such as the first terrestrial invertebrates to adapt to life on land. The Devonian period, which lasted from 411 to 359 million years ago, was truly the age of fish and is often referred to as the Age of Fish. During this time, ancient oceans teemed with a wide variety of these creatures, ranging from small armored fish to giant predators with powerful jaws that symbolized danger in their ecosystems. A significant milestone in the evolution of fish was the appearance of jawless fish, which were the first vertebrates. These primitive creatures, such as lampreys and lancelets, inhabited the ocean depths, using their suction mouths to feed on dead organisms. On the other hand, armored fish like osteichthyons and antipods, protected by tough shells, were able to defend themselves against predators. Their strong shields made them nearly invulnerable in the struggle for survival. Cartilaginous fish like sharks and rays began to develop during this period, and their unique adaptations, such as sensitivity to electric fields and a cartilaginous skeleton instead of bone, allowed them to occupy the niche of top predators. Bony fish, which appeared later, quickly gained popularity due to their flexible fins and diverse body shapes, which provided them with high speed and maneuverability. These fish, such as Danios and Latimerius, became the foundation of marine ecosystems during the Devonian period. Ancient coral reefs, formed by colonies of coral polyps, served as homes for numerous marine creatures. These reefs, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, provided shelter and food for fish, mollusks, and other invertebrates, creating complex ecosystems teeming with life. In deep-sea zones where sunlight did not penetrate, strange bioluminescent predators like lampreys and certain types of sharks hunted, using bioluminescence to attract prey. The Devonian period was an era of rapid development and diversification, when marine ecosystems reached unprecedented levels of complexity and diversity. Around 300 million years ago, these waters were home to more than 300 different species of fish, which laid the foundation for further evolution in subsequent geological periods. Approximately 360 million years ago, during the Devonian period on Earth, a significant stage of evolution occurred: the appearance of the first tetrapods. These transitional creatures, such as Tiktaalik and Acanthostega, served as a link between fish and terrestrial vertebrates. Tiktaalik, discovered in 2006 in Canada, was a predator up to 2.5 meters long, with a flat head and powerful limbs that were beginning to take on a form suitable for movement on land. Its gills were retained for underwater breathing, but it also developed lungs, which helped it survive in water bodies with low oxygen levels. Acanthostega, found in 2003 in Greenland, was about 1 meter long and had 8 limbs, which was unusual for modern species. These limbs were not entirely familiar to us, but rather resembled fins that gradually transformed into more rigid structures, allowing animals to move in shallow water and even on land. The habitat of these creatures primarily included marshy coastal zones and drying up water bodies, where they could easily adapt to changing conditions. The transition to land gave them a significant evolutionary advantage, as competition for resources was lower in such places than in the depths of the ocean. These pioneers, capable of both swimming and crawling, initially used their limbs for support on soft ground, allowing them to explore new ecosystems. Around them, a new type of environment was formed where water and land intertwined, creating unique conditions for life. Thus, Tiktaalik and Acanthostega became the founders of the group of animals that later evolved into diverse amphibians and reptiles. Scientific research shows that it was precisely during the Devonian period that key changes in anatomy occurred, enabling mobility both in water and on land. These changes became the basis for further evolution of vertebrates, leading to the appearance of all modern terrestrial animals. For example, Tiktaalik had a head size of about 30 centimeters, which allowed it to effectively hunt small fish and other aquatic organisms, and its legs, about 30 centimeters long, were strong enough for movement in shallow water. Carboniferous forests were unique ecosystems that existed approximately 300 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period. These dense, wet, and swampy forests covered vast areas, creating a landscape completely different from modern forests. The primary plant forms in these forests were spore-bearing plants, such as giant ferns, horsetails, and club mosses, which grew to significant sizes. The height of these ferns often exceeded 20 meters, creating a green canopy high above the ground, while their broad leaves provided dense shade, contributing to the formation of a moist and warm microclimate in the understory. Unlike modern forests, where flowering plants and grasses dominate, Carboniferous forests were inhabited exclusively by spore-bearing plants, giving them a distinct and exotic character. There were no familiar trees with flowers and fruits in these forests. Instead, they were filled with unusual forms of life that had adapted to the conditions of a tropical climate. The microclimate created by the dense vegetation led to the formation of bogs and shallow water bodies, where various aquatic organisms could thrive. The soil in these forests was rich in organic matter, which facilitated the formation of coal. Precisely why Carboniferous forests became the primary sources of coal, which is still used today. It is also worth noting that during this time, there were no mammals on Earth, and the dominant land animals were reptiles and amphibians, which inhabited these ecosystems, relying on the dense vegetation for shelter and hunting. Thus, Carboniferous forests represented a world where life evolved according to completely different laws than in our familiar environment. Due to changes in climate and carbon dioxide levels, by the end of the Carboniferous period, the forests began to disappear, leaving behind rich coal deposits that became the foundation for the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. Today, Carboniferous forests are known only through fossilized remains found in various parts of the world, providing insight into how life on the planet looked in the distant past. During the Carboniferous period, which spanned from the Triassic to the Permian periods, Earth was home to true giants among insects. Dragonflies with wingspans of up to 70 centimeters soared over ancient swamps, their enormous eyes catching the slightest movement in the air. These incredible predators had powerful legs that allowed them to catch small insects and even small vertebrates like frogs. Their size was due to the high oxygen content in the atmosphere, which reached nearly 30%, enabling them to grow to immense sizes and maintain active metabolism. Millipedes of this time, such as Meganeura, could reach lengths of over 2 meters and move through the undergrowth, leaving distinctive tracks. These creatures hunted smaller invertebrates, using their numerous legs to catch and hold their prey. Giant scorpions like Paleodiscus could reach lengths of 1 meter and were formidable predators of their time. They used their powerful pincers to seize food and could easily handle any competitors. Spiders like Megapteropus also experienced significant size increases. Their bodies could reach 40 centimeters in length, with leg spans complementing this impressive appearance. These spiders wove enormous webs that covered entire forest areas, creating traps for insects and small vertebrates. These arthropod giants dug burrows in soft soil, creating complex underground systems where they could hide from predators and find shelter during periods of unfavorable weather. Their gigantism was not only a result of high oxygen levels, but also evolutionary pressure, driving the development of larger forms to survive in conditions of competition for food and territory. Remarkably, it was these conditions that led to insects in the Carboniferous period becoming some of the largest animals on the planet, leaving a profound mark on Earth's history. Their fossils, found in places like the coal mines of Pennsylvania, demonstrate not only their size, but also the diversity of their forms, allowing scientists to reconstruct the ecosystems of ancient swamps and forests where these giants once reigned. The formation of coal seams is an extraordinary and slow process that has been ongoing for millions of years. This process began with the remains of ancient plants that, when they fell into marshy soil, did not decompose completely. This occurred due to the lack of oxygen in the water, creating ideal conditions for the preservation of plant material. In such conditions, mosses, ferns, and other plants typically accumulated, dying and sinking to the bottom of the marshes, gradually being covered by new layers of vegetation. This process resembles a multi-layered cake, where each new layer of plants added to the overall mass. Over time, under the pressure of overlying rocks and in conditions of high temperature, this mass of organic material transformed into coal. According to research, the process of coal formation takes from several tens to hundreds of millions of years. For example, in some European coal basins, such as the Silesian coal basin, the remains of ancient forests that existed more than 300 million years ago became the basis for the formation of significant coal reserves. Coal was formed not only due to biochemical processes of decomposition, but also under the influence of geological factors such as tectonic movements, which changed the pressure and temperature in the Earth's interior. Modern coal mines can be seen as time machines. They allow us to extract and use solar energy stored by plants hundreds of millions of years ago. For example, in states like Virginia and West Virginia in the United States, coal mines provide access to seams that formed during the Devonian and Carboniferous periods, when the Earth was covered with dense forests and marshes. During their formation, coal seams could reach thicknesses of several meters, and we can observe how they are located between layers of sandstones and clays, which also formed as a result of geological processes. Each mine is not just a source of energy, it is an archive of ancient life, where the remains of plants and their coal equivalents tell us about the climatic and ecological conditions of those times. Coal extracted from these mines is not only fuel for power plants, but also a crucial element of our history, helping us understand what life on Earth looked like in prehistoric times. Today, the world's coal reserves are estimated at more than 1 trillion tons, and its extraction remains a key factor in the energy balance of many countries. The Permian extinction occurred approximately 250 million years ago and was the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history. This event wiped out around 90% of all species, including marine and terrestrial animals, vegetation, and microorganisms. Imagine a planet where once teeming oceans, filled with diverse marine life, became lifeless and empty. Giant trilobites, Paleozoic corals, and even early amphibians that inhabited the land disappeared due to catastrophic changes in the ecosystem. At this time, Earth turned into a vast graveyard, where life seemed to be almost completely erased from the planet's face. The drama of this moment lies in the fact that the biosphere was on the brink of total collapse. Existing ecosystems, which had developed over millions of years, crumbled, and many species were unable to adapt to the rapidly changing conditions. This was an era when life on Earth was in terrible danger, and the planet teetered on the edge of destruction. Recovery from this catastrophic event took millions of years, and it was not until the beginning of the Mesozoic era that ecosystems began to slowly recover. As a result of this extinction, new species emerged that subsequently dominated Earth's ecosystems. One such species was the dinosaurs, which occupied the vacant niches and evolved into an incredible diversity of forms and sizes. The restoration of the biosphere went through numerous stages, and it took more than 30 million years for ecosystems to reach the level of diversity that existed before the Permian extinction. The Permian extinction did not only destroy numerous species, but also altered the very history of life on the planet, paving the way for new forms that would dominate Earth in the future. This event marked the beginning of a new evolutionary process, which, although triggered by a catastrophe, led to the remarkable diversity of life that we observe today. Studying this extinction allows us to understand how sensitive life on Earth is to changes in its environment and how quickly ecosystems can be disrupted. It is interesting to note that after this mass extinction, life not only recovered, but also acquired new, previously unknown forms, such as mammals and birds, which became dominant groups in subsequent eras. Just as nature restores itself after forest fires, the Permian extinction served as a catalyst for a new beginning in Earth's history. Siberian traps represent one of the most extensive volcanic events in Earth's history, potentially playing a key role in the Permian extinction. These colossal lava flows, which emerged around 250 million years ago, covered territories now known as Siberia and had an area comparable to modern Europe. The eruptions lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, resulting in layers of basaltic rock up to 2 kilometers thick. According to geological research, including that of Dr. Stephen Martin from the Institute of Geology, the amount of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds released into the atmosphere could have been enormous, creating a greenhouse effect and leading to a sharp rise in global temperatures. This caused significant climate changes, which in turn led to the alteration of ecosystems and the extinction of many species. Data collected over decades of research suggest that these eruptions could have increased atmospheric carbon dioxide levels by more than 300%, leading to ocean acidification and a decrease in oxygen levels in water. This resulted in the mass extinction of marine life such as trilobites and brachiopods, which could not adapt to the new conditions. The increase in sulfur compounds in the atmosphere also contributed to the formation of acid rain, further exacerbating the situation on land and in water bodies. During these volcanic eruptions, vast clouds of ash were formed, which could block out sunlight for years, causing rapid temperature fluctuations and affecting plant photosynthesis. This meant that ecosystems dependent on solar energy began to face serious difficulties. Research indicates that such conditions could have led to the extinction of more than 95% of all species on Earth by the end of the Permian period. Comparing this with other mass extinctions, such as the extinction of the dinosaurs, shows that volcanism and its consequences could have been the catalyst for significant ecological changes. The Siberian traps fundamentally altered Earth's landscape, creating conditions under which life on the planet was threatened. From a geological perspective, the traps are the result of tectonic processes occurring at the junction of continental plates, which characterize the activity of the region. Studying rock samples, geologists have found that the activity of volcanoes in this area was linked to hotspots in the mantle, which created powerful magma flows. These processes continue to this day, reminding us of the catastrophic events that occurred millions of years ago. The Siberian traps remain a significant topic of research, as their study helps us better understand the mechanisms of extinction and the recovery of ecosystems in the face of global changes. The scale of these eruptions is breathtaking. During the active period of the volcanoes in Siberia, more than 1 billion cubic kilometers of lava were released. This amount could have covered the entire Earth with a layer of several centimeters. Scientists such as Dr. John Hunter from the University of California believe that such catastrophic events can serve as a warning to modern humanity facing global warming and environmental crises. The Siberian traps not only altered the climate and biosphere of their time, but also left an indelible mark on the history of our planet. As a result of these catastrophic events, life on Earth was forced to adapt and evolve into new forms, which became the basis for the further development of mammals and birds, which in turn occupied dominant positions in ecosystems. The Mesozoic era, spanning a period from 250 to 65 million years ago, represents a unique and significant stage in Earth's history, comparable to the Middle Ages in human history, when one civilization gave way to another, and life on the planet found its path again after major catastrophes. This era is divided into three main periods: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, each bringing its own evolutionary achievements and changes in ecosystems. The Mesozoic era began after the Permian extinction, which wiped out around 95% of all life on Earth, and ended with the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, which marked the end of the age of reptiles and paved the way for mammals. In the Triassic period, approximately 250 million years ago, life on Earth began to recover. The first dinosaurs appeared, along with other groups such as the ancestors of modern mammals and birds, which began to occupy the newly available ecological niches. At this time, the first primitive flowering plants also appeared, gradually beginning to displace spore-bearing plants. The Jurassic period, which lasted from 203 to 200 million years ago, was a time of dinosaur dominance. These reptiles developed an incredible diversity of forms and sizes, from small predators to giant herbivores like the Brachiosaurus, which could reach lengths of up to 25 meters and weigh up to 100 tons. During the Jurassic period, significant changes also occurred in the plant world, as flowering plants began to compete with ferns and horsetails. It was also during this time that the first true birds appeared, such as Archaeopteryx, which possessed both reptilian and avian characteristics. The Cretaceous period, which lasted from 130 to 65 million years ago, marked the end of the Mesozoic era and the time when flowering plants finally conquered the land. This was a period when dinosaurs reached their maximum diversity, with famous species like Tyrannosaurus and Stegosaurus embodying the power and majesty of this epoch. At the same time, marine ecosystems were filled with giant reptiles like plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, while pterosaurs dominated the skies. The Mesozoic era was a time of great evolutionary innovations, when the diversity of life not only persisted but flourished, creating a new ecosystem in which new species occupied niches left vacant by the Permian extinction. For example, by the end of the Cretaceous period, flowering plants became the primary producers of oxygen, contributing to the creation of new ecological systems where mammals began to develop and adapt to diverse conditions. These changes foreshadowed the extinction of dinosaurs, opening the door for mammals to become the dominant life form on the planet. The Mesozoic era left behind a rich legacy in the form of fossil remains that help contemporary scientists understand the complex relationships between organisms and their habitats. During this time, Earth was more diverse than ever, and it was here that the foundations for future evolution were laid. The Triassic period, which lasted from 242 to 230 million years ago, was a time when life on Earth slowly recovered from the catastrophic Permian extinction, which wiped out around 94% of all marine species and 76% of terrestrial species. After this mass extinction, the world was left in a state of desolation. Once thriving ecosystems had turned into barren landscapes where silence reigned. The plants and animals that survived this catastrophic period began to slowly fill the vacant ecological niches, creating new communities. During this time, new groups of reptiles emerged, becoming the dominant inhabitants of the restored ecosystems. The ancestors of dinosaurs, crocodiles, and turtles began to actively develop. One of the characteristic features of the Triassic period was the presence of various forms of theropods, from which true dinosaurs would eventually evolve. In this period, the first turtles also appeared, which, incidentally, have retained their features for millions of years. The climate of the Triassic period was hot and arid, especially on the larger part of the supercontinent Pangaea, which was a vast landmass surrounded by ocean. The temperature in the air during this period often exceeded 30 degrees Celsius, and the arid climate contributed to the formation of extensive deserts. In such conditions, survival became an art. Organisms had to adapt to temperature fluctuations and limited resources. The appearance of new flora also played a significant role in the restoration of ecosystems. Conifers began to dominate the landscapes, providing shade and protection for smaller organisms. At this time, vegetation began to recover, and forests gradually filled the gaps left by the extinction. There were even groups of lizards that could move on land and in trees, which became the basis for future evolution. As a result of this diversification on the planet, unique ecosystems began to appear, and the surviving groups of organisms began to actively explore new territories. For example, in the late Triassic, the first ancestors of modern mammals appeared, which began to compete with reptiles for resources. This period laid the foundation for the future dominance of dinosaurs, which would later fill all ecological niches, from terrestrial to aerial and aquatic. An important event of this time was that it was in the Triassic period that all the main groups of reptiles were formed, which would determine the appearance of Earth for many millions of years to come. Scientific research shows that it was during the Triassic period that the evolution of new forms of life began, which would later become dominant in various ecosystems. Excavations show that during this time there were diverse ecosystems where various types of reptiles, plants, and all those who could adapt to the new conditions of life coexisted. Pangaea was an ancient supercontinent that existed approximately 300 million years ago and broke apart around 180 million years ago. This massive landmass united almost the entire Earth's surface, creating unique conditions for life and ecosystems. At its peak, Pangaea encompassed nearly all of today's continents, forming vast plains, mountain ranges, and diverse landscapes. Pangaea was surrounded by the ocean Panthalassa, which occupied a vast portion of the planet and was the only global ocean of its time. The isolation and unity of Pangaea contributed to the formation of a unique climate that differed significantly from modern conditions. The interior regions of the supercontinent were far from the sea, resulting in a continental climate with sharp temperature fluctuations and drier conditions, unlike the more temperate and stable climatic zones we observe today. Scientists such as Alfred Wegener, who proposed the theory of continental drift in the early 20th century, noted that this unification of land masses led to significant changes in oceanic currents and atmospheric flows. The ocean Panthalassa, due to its enormous size, exerted a significant influence on climatic conditions, contributing to the formation of tropical and subtropical zones on the periphery of the continent, while the interior regions remained more arid. This diversity of climates facilitated the evolution of numerous species, many of which could not have survived the conditions that emerged after the breakup of Pangaea. Scientific research indicates that the existence of Pangaea also promoted species migration, as all major groups of organisms were concentrated in one place, increasing the likelihood of their interaction and genetic exchange. Paleontologists find evidence of this in fossil remains, which demonstrate similarities between species found in different parts of Pangaea, such as some reptiles and ancient plants. With the breakup of Pangaea and the formation of today's continents, conditions for life changed, leading to the emergence of new ecosystems and the extinction of many species unable to adapt to the new conditions. Ultimately, Pangaea not only shaped the landscape of Earth, but also created conditions that influenced the evolution of life, laying the foundation for the formation of today's biodiversity. Scientific data show that such changes occurred over millions of years, and the study of geological layers reveals that climatic and ecological conditions varied depending on the location of land and oceans. The central regions of Pangaea, distant from the oceans, were vast expanses with extreme continental climate. Summer temperatures could reach 35 degrees Celsius, while winter colds could drop to -20 degrees. These harsh conditions formed extensive deserts and semi-deserts, such as the famous Gobi Desert, which stretched across the territories of modern China and Mongolia. The interior regions of Pangaea were home to rare oases, surrounded by rocky formations, serving as the last sanctuaries for diverse flora and fauna. For instance, around 80 million years ago, these areas were inhabited by plants like cycads and conifers that had adapted to arid conditions, retaining moisture in their dense leaves and roots. The existence of large lakes, such as the predecessor of the modern Caspian Sea, provided temporary water sources that facilitated the survival of some species. The combination of these factors led to the development of special adaptations. Cacti, for example, learned to store water in their stems, while many herbivorous species, such as ornithopod dinosaurs, began to migrate in search of food and water. These conditions created a unique ecosystem where every living creature struggled for survival. Scientific research shows that these regions were not only home to dinosaurs, but also to other creatures like reptiles and mammals, which used every drop of rain for their existence. The conditions were such that only a few species could survive, leading to evolutionary changes in their biology. Harsh climatic conditions, such as strong winds and dust storms, were part of the daily life of these ecosystems, creating a unique landscape and forming adaptive strategies. For example, only those species that could most effectively utilize limited resources survived. As a result, vast areas with sparse vegetation and isolated water bodies became true oases of life in this harsh climate, where plants and animals interacted in a complex network of interdependencies. These phenomena not only shaped the ecosystem, but also influenced the migration and evolution of species, adapting them to the specific conditions of the interior continent. Periods of drought alternated with brief rainy seasons, creating a constant tension between life and death. Thus, the interior regions of Pangaea were not just empty spaces, but arenas for survival, where every living creature was part of a complex, interconnected system adapted to the harsh conditions. These ecosystems were witnesses to constant struggle for existence, highlighting their vulnerability and uniqueness. The breakup of Pangaea began around 180 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, when tectonic forces began to tear the single landmass into separate continents. This geological catastrophe led to the formation of new oceans, such as the Atlantic and Indian, which resulted from the movement of continental plates. The plates, in constant motion, began to drift apart, creating narrow sea straits that over time widened and deepened, transforming into vast oceans. For example, the Atlantic Ocean, which became one of the largest on the planet, initially formed as a narrow gap between North and South America and Eurasia, and then its size increased due to the ongoing movement of the plates. These tectonic processes altered the configuration of ocean currents, which in turn influenced the climatic conditions on Earth. The opening of new water bodies led to changes in temperature regimes and precipitation, contributing to the creation of diverse ecosystems. For instance, changes in currents in equatorial and polar regions altered the migration of marine organisms, affecting the evolution of species such as sharks and cetaceans, which adapted to the new living conditions. Additionally, the breakup of Pangaea resulted in the formation of new continents, such as Africa, Australia, and Antarctica, which became home to unique flora and fauna with no counterparts elsewhere. This process also opened new opportunities for the migration of species that were previously isolated from each other. For example, on the new continent formed as a result of the separation of Gondwana, unique ecosystems emerged that developed under conditions completely different from those that existed before the breakup. As a result, life on the planet underwent significant changes, influencing the evolutionary paths of many groups of organisms, such as dinosaurs, mammals, and birds. This monumental geological process, occurring over millions of years, not only altered the landscapes of Earth, but also laid the foundation for future biodiversity. Scientific research, such as the work of geologists and paleontologists, has shown that plate tectonics is the driving force that shapes our planet and continues to make changes to its structure and climate. For example, contemporary research shows that the rate of plate separation is approximately 2 centimeters per year, leading to constant changes in the geography and ecology of the planet. The Jurassic period, which spanned approximately 230 to 160 million years ago, served as a true arena for dinosaurs, who dominated the terrestrial vertebrates. During this time, they not only survived, but thrived, occupying numerous ecological niches and developing diverse forms and sizes. For instance, among them were giants like the Argentinosaurus, which could reach 30 meters in length and, unlike modern mammals, could weigh up to 100 tons. At the same time, the Jurassic landscapes were home to small, agile predators like velociraptors, which, despite their size, could hunt in packs, ensuring high efficiency in food acquisition. The ecosystems of the Jurassic period were characterized by lush forests filled with giant horsetails and ferns, giving the landscape a unique green and dense appearance. These forests were abundant, and their undergrowth hid small mammals like Morganucodon, which was small in size and likely nocturnal to avoid predators. On vast plains covered with cycads and ginkgos, herds of sauropods roamed, reaching heights of up to 6 meters and feeding on the leaves of tall trees. These dinosaurs migrated in search of food, and their tracks can be found in numerous fossils discovered in places like Montana and Mexico. Coastal swamps and lagoons of the Jurassic period were home to diverse fauna, including marine reptiles like plesiosaurs, which swam in warm waters and could reach lengths of up to 12 meters. These ecosystems supported high biological diversity, with many species, including mollusks and corals, thriving in these conditions. Paleontological findings, such as the fossils in the Solnhofen Formation in the United States, indicate that during this time there were numerous dinosaur species, ranging from herbivores to carnivores, highlighting the diversity of life on the planet. By the end of the Jurassic period, dinosaurs had become so dominant that they filled almost all possible ecological niches, and their impact was felt throughout the Mesozoic era. Moreover, this period witnessed the emergence of the first large mammals, which began to evolve to adapt to changes in their environment, including competition with dinosaurs. The number of species and their diversity increased significantly during the Jurassic period, leading to the creation of complex food chains and ecosystems where each creature played a crucial role. An important aspect of the Jurassic period was the presence of climate changes that contributed to the development of tropical and subtropical climate zones. These climatic conditions provided abundant vegetation, which in turn created ideal conditions for the survival and reproduction of dinosaurs. Phosphorites and coal found in Jurassic period deposits indicate a high concentration of organic matter, which contributed to the formation of fertile soils. Based on these data, it can be concluded that the Jurassic period was a golden age for dinosaurs, their evolution and diversity, shaping ecosystems that continue to fascinate and inspire scientists. Archaeopteryx, which lived approximately 150 million years ago during the Jurassic period, is a unique example of a transitional form between reptiles and birds. This creature, about the size of a crow, with a length of around 50 centimeters, possessed characteristics of both dinosaurs and birds. Archaeopteryx had teeth, a long bony tail, and claws on its wings, indicating its reptilian heritage. At the same time, the presence of feathers and wings, as well as the shape of its wishbone, key features found in modern birds, suggests its evolutionary transition. These feathers were likely used not only for flight, but also for thermoregulation and display, which was relevant in the dense forests of the Jurassic period. The lifestyle of Archaeopteryx may have included gliding from tree to tree or short flights between branches, allowing it to avoid predators and hunt insects and small vertebrates. Archaeopteryx could have spent much of its time in tree canopies, where its coloration and body shape helped it camouflage from predators. Discoveries of Archaeopteryx, including famous specimens from Germany like the fossils found in the Lagerstätte of Bavaria, have become one of the most important confirmations of evolutionary theory. These finds demonstrated the gradual transformation of one group of animals into another, illustrating how reptiles evolved into birds. Archaeopteryx has become a symbol of evolution, showing that changes in anatomy and behavior can occur through natural selection. Its discoveries also supported Charles Darwin's theories, emphasizing that evolutionary processes take place not instantaneously, but over millions of years. The significance of Archaeopteryx in paleontology is hard to overestimate, as it has formed the basis for further research on the origin of birds. Currently, only about 10 well-preserved fossils of this creature have been registered, making it one of the most studied fossilized organisms. These specimens allow scientists to study the anatomy, structure of the feathers, and adaptations of Archaeopteryx to its environment, deepening the understanding of evolutionary processes. The Cretaceous period represents the final stage of the Mesozoic era, during which Earth witnessed significant geological and biological changes. Continents continued to move, gradually separating and forming new oceans and altering the climate. Sea levels reached record highs, flooding vast areas and creating new marine ecosystems. This period is characterized not only by substantial landscape changes, but also by the emergence of new groups of organisms that began to dominate the planet. One of the most notable features of the Cretaceous period was the development of flowering plants, which began to compete with previously dominant coniferous and fern forests. Flowering plants provided new food sources for numerous animals, leading to significant changes in food chains and ecosystems. At the same time, the Cretaceous period was a stage of evolutionary innovations. Dinosaurs reached enormous sizes, and bird ancestors developed more complex forms of flight. In this diversity, life on Earth experienced its best days, creating unique ecosystems where both marine and terrestrial organisms thrived. However, this time was not without dramatic events. The Cretaceous period ended with one of the most famous mass extinctions in Earth's history, when around 70% of all species, including dinosaurs, disappeared. This extinction was likely caused by the collision of Earth with a large asteroid, which led to rapid climate changes and disruptions in ecosystems, proving fatal for many forms of life. The collision is believed to have occurred on the territory of present-day Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where the famous Chicxulub crater is located. This crater, with a diameter of around 30 kilometers, serves as evidence of how extraterrestrial events can have catastrophic impacts on life on Earth. Thus, the Cretaceous period was a time of both grandeur and tragedy, leaving a deep mark on the history of life on the planet. The Mesozoic Sea, with its extensive shallow basins, flooded significant areas of modern continents, creating conditions for a rich marine life. At the peak of the Mesozoic period, approximately 100 million years ago, the level of the world ocean was much higher than it is now, allowing the sea to cover low-lying areas that are now part of the land. These warm, shallow seas were true incubators of life, where ammonites and belemnites, mollusks with characteristic spiral shells, thrived. It is known that ammonites were not only numerous but also diverse, ranging from small to large specimens, some reaching a diameter of more than a meter. These creatures left behind extensive fossil beds that serve as important indicators of geological and climatic changes of that time. Marine reptiles, including plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, also inhabited these waters, demonstrating an amazing variety of forms and sizes. Their predatory habits and adaptations allowed them to successfully hunt fish and other marine creatures. Primitive bony fish, such as the Jurassic ancestors of modern sturgeons, also lived in these seas, occupying their niche in the ecosystem. On the bottom of these marine basins, white chalky silt accumulated, consisting of the skeletons of microscopic organisms such as Foraminifera and Coccolithophores. These organisms, dying, settled on the bottom, forming layers of limestone that later became the basis for chalk, giving the name to the entire period. Layer by layer, accumulating, they created powerful deposits that were subsequently exposed due to tectonic processes. These limestone deposits can be seen today in places like the English coast of Dover, where white cliffs are not only a beautiful landscape, but also a testament to ancient marine life. The Mesozoic Sea was not just a sea, but a true ocean of life, full of diversity and dynamism, where each living creature played its role in the complex ecosystem. During the Cretaceous period, which lasted from 130 to 66 million years ago, a true botanical revolution occurred. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, began to dominate the earth. These plants, with their vibrant colors and fruits, became not just an adornment, but a crucial element of ecosystems. Their appearance marked the beginning of a new era in the evolution of flora, as they offered more efficient methods of reproduction compared to gymnosperms. For instance, through symbiosis with pollinators like bees and butterflies, flowering plants could increase the chances of successful pollination and, consequently, reproduction. Research shows that by the end of the Cretaceous period, flowering plants occupied more than half of all terrestrial ecosystems, displacing more primitive types. Magnolia flowers, which appeared around 100 million years ago, already attracted pollinators with their large white petals and sweet nectar. Platanus and ficus trees, which emerged around the same time, provided new ecological niches for animals, offering shelter and food. For example, ficus trees, with their succulent fruits, became a primary food source for many animal species, including birds and mammals. The transformation of Cretaceous forests was noticeable. Forests previously dominated by coniferous trees began to fill with a variety of flowering plants, creating more complex ecosystems. These forests were now inhabited not only by ancient reptiles and dinosaurs, but also by new mammalian and insect species that adapted to the changing conditions. An important example is the appearance of the first bees, which evolved in parallel with flowering plants, and their symbiosis became critically important for the future evolution of both plants and insects. Each new species of flowering plant contributed to the enrichment of the biosphere, creating conditions for the emergence of new forms of life. By the end of the Cretaceous period, flowering plants had formed an immense diversity of forms, from small herbs to giant trees, which became the foundation for the ecosystems we know today. And this process continued to intensify with each million years. On the border between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, approximately 65 million years ago, one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history occurred: the impact of the Chicxulub asteroid. This celestial body, with a diameter of about 10 kilometers, struck the planet on the territory of the present-day Yucatan Peninsula, leaving a crater with a diameter of more than 100 kilometers. At the moment of impact, a blinding flash occurred, its brightness exceeding the sun's by tens of times. This event caused immediate vaporization of rock and the release of colossal amounts of energy, equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, resulting in the formation of a giant tsunami that overwhelmed coastal regions. As a result of this collision, approximately 3 billion tons of dust and ash were ejected into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and creating a nuclear winter effect. This process led to a sharp drop in global temperature, disrupting photosynthesis. Plants, suffering from a lack of light, began to die, causing a collapse of food chains. Global fires, sparked by the impact, spread across vast areas, releasing carbon and sulfur into the atmosphere, contributing to the formation of acid rain. This rain eroded soil and water bodies, making them unsuitable for life. Ultimately, approximately 75% of all species on the planet, including non-avian dinosaurs, went extinct. This catastrophic process unfolded over several thousand years, leaving Earth in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where life barely managed to survive. The consequences of this event were felt for millions of years, shaping new ecosystems and paving the way for the rise of mammals, which eventually became the dominant species on the planet. The Chicxulub crater, which has survived to this day, has become an important archaeological discovery and a subject of study, allowing scientists to reconstruct the details of this dramatic moment in Earth's history. The Cenozoic era began approximately 66 million years ago and continues to the present day, representing a new epoch of life on Earth marked by significant changes in ecosystems and biological diversity. This era is divided into three periods: the Paleogene, Neogene, and Quaternary, each characterized by unique climatic conditions and ecological changes. Following the catastrophic extinction at the boundary of the Cretaceous and Paleogene, which wiped out not only dinosaurs but also many other species, the newly available ecological niches began to be filled by new groups of organisms. Mammals, which had previously been small and inconspicuous, began to evolve into diverse forms, ranging from large herbivores to predators like saber-toothed tigers that appeared at the beginning of the Neogene. Meanwhile, birds that survived the extinction process began to diversify into new species, filling the skies and seas. Birds such as albatrosses and penguins acquired unique adaptations, allowing them to occupy various ecological niches. Flowering plants, which began to flourish in the Cenozoic, became the dominant group of plants, transforming the planet's landscape and providing new food sources for animals. Research indicates that these plants emerged around 130 million years ago, but it was during the Cenozoic era that they became the primary components of ecosystems, creating vast forests and meadows in bloom. Insects such as bees and butterflies also survived this period of change, and their diversity increased, contributing to the pollination of flowering plants. The interaction of all these groups resulted in more complex and diverse ecosystems, establishing stable food chains. Climatic changes during this period, including global warming and cooling, also facilitated the migration of species seeking more favorable living conditions. Thus, the Cenozoic era is an extraordinary example of life's recovery and adaptation on Earth, where new organisms not only survived, but thrived, creating the world we know today. In this context, the Cenozoic era is often referred to as the Age of Mammals. But it is important not to overlook the significance of other groups, such as birds and flowering plants, which played a crucial role in shaping modern ecosystems. Data on the distribution of various species shows that by the beginning of the Quaternary period, around 2 million years ago, a significant diversity of mammals already inhabited all continents except Antarctica. After the extinction of dinosaurs around 66 million years ago, the planet entered the Paleocene epoch, a period during which mammals began to rapidly evolve and occupy ecological niches vacated by large reptiles. During this time, mammals were small, often primitive creatures that were just beginning to adapt to new conditions. The Paleocene lasted approximately 60 million years and marked the beginning of a radiation of mammals that led to the emergence of many unusual forms. One such group were the pantodonts, which were essentially evolutionary experiments. These creatures could reach lengths of up to 2 meters and had massive skulls with wide jaws. They were herbivorous and likely fed on leaves and soft plants. Mesonychids, which lived during the same period, were carnivorous mammals resembling modern wolves and reaching lengths of about 1 meter. Their sharp teeth and powerful paws enabled them to hunt smaller animals, making them significant players in the ecosystem of the time. Multituberculates, such as hypsodonts, had unique dental structures designed for chewing hard vegetation, but their form and size had no equivalents among modern mammals. They were quite large, reaching lengths of around 2.5 meters, and possessed unusual anatomy that allowed them to experiment with various ways of feeding. These groups of mammals, despite their uniqueness, did not survive in the long term and soon disappeared. This was a period when nature conducted its experiments, and many of these forms of mammals were unable to adapt to changing conditions. By the beginning of the Eocene epoch, approximately 10 million years after the start of the Paleocene, many of these evolutionary experiments gave way to more specialized species that could better cope with ecological challenges. An important point is that the Paleocene laid the foundation for the formation of modern ecosystems, where mammals began to develop complex social behaviors and diverse ways of life. Specific facts show that it was during this period that mammals began to occupy new ecological niches, leading to the emergence of groups such as primates and cetaceans in the future. The formation of the Himalayas is one of the most impressive examples of orogenesis in the Cenozoic era, which began around 40 million years ago and continues to this day. The Indian tectonic plate, moving north at a speed of approximately 30 millimeters per year, collided with the Eurasian plate, resulting in a complex and multi-stage process of crustal compression and uplift. This immense geological force created a colossal mountain range that now rises to a height of over 8 kilometers above sea level. The process of mountain building was not instantaneous. It occurred over millions of years as layers of crustal material were gradually compressed, forming continuous mountain chains and high peaks. On this stage, real battles took place. Tectonic plates were squeezed, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that added new layers to the existing high-altitude formations. For example, the height of Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world, reaches 8,888 meters, making it a symbol of this powerful geological process. The formation of the Himalayas also had a colossal impact on the climate conditions in the region and beyond. The high peaks became a natural barrier for air masses, stopping moist monsoon winds that bring rain to India and Nepal. This created unique ecological niches where the diversity of flora and fauna began to evolve in response to new conditions. On the southern slopes, where the climate is more humid, tropical forests grow, while on the northern slopes, where monsoon rains do not reach, deserts and arid landscapes form. Thus, in the Himalayas, unique ecosystems were formed, which became home to many species, including rare animals such as the snow leopard and the giant panda. These mountains not only changed the landscape of the region, but also had a significant impact on the evolution of species, as many of them adapted to the drastically changed living conditions. The Himalayas, being one of the youngest mountain systems on the planet, continue to grow and change, making them a subject of constant study for geologists and biologists. The Paleogene climatic optimum was a unique phase in Earth's history, characterized by an extremely warm climate that enveloped a large portion of the planet. During this time, when Earth was at the dawn of the Cenozoic era, polar ice caps were virtually non-existent, altering not only the climate, but the entire ecosystem. In place of today's Arctic ice, dense forests thrived, filled with diverse vegetation, including conifers and deciduous trees, as well as exotic plants like palms and figs that cannot survive in today's harsh conditions. Many groups of animals, including reptiles, which are typically associated with warm regions, flourished. Crocodiles and turtles inhabited the Arctic and Antarctic, demonstrating that even these polar regions were teeming with life. Large mammals, such as primitive ancestors of today's elephants, found suitable habitats in the forests, along with a variety of bird species that utilized the abundant vegetation for protection and food. This was an era when Earth's ecosystems displayed unprecedented diversity, and many species adapted to the warm climate, facilitating their prosperity. Forests stretched far north, creating conditions for the existence of heat-loving species that today are more commonly associated with equatorial regions. Even in remote corners like Scandinavia and Greenland, traces of flora and fauna from this time could be found, which seem unimaginable today. This was an epoch when the planet was characterized by extraordinary climatic conditions that fostered the rapid development of life, resulting in the accumulation of vast organic carbon reserves that later became the basis for the formation of coal and oil deposits. Research conducted by geologists shows that during this period, there was a significant increase in biological diversity, which in turn led to the formation of new ecosystems that became the foundation for further evolution. The world was filled with the sounds of tropical forests, where a multitude of different animal species created a unique harmony of life that left a deep mark on Earth's history. This climatic optimum was not only a period of warmth, but also a true paradise for many species, providing them with the opportunity to develop and adapt to diverse conditions. Scientists studying the fossil remains of this time find evidence of the existence of giant mammals, such as Mesozoic whales, which were predecessors of today's whales and dolphins. This period also saw the appearance of the first modern plant species, adding even more diversity to the ecosystems of the time. These conditions created an ideal environment for life, where heat-loving creatures could easily find food and shelter, which in turn influenced their evolution and adaptation to various conditions. The abundance of resources facilitated the migration of many animal and plant species to new areas, expanding their habitats. Thus, the Paleogene climatic optimum was a pivotal moment in Earth's history, opening new horizons for life and evolution. Eocene tropical forests of Antarctica present a remarkable and mysterious world that existed around 45 million years ago. At that time, the southern polar continent was covered with lush forests where southern beeches, podocarps, and other tree species thrived, creating a dense green canopy that seems almost fantastical today. Temperatures in this region fluctuated within the range of 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, allowing diverse ecosystems to flourish. The forests were inhabited by a multitude of unique creatures, from marsupial mammals like ancient ancestors of kangaroos, to giant flightless birds resembling modern emus and ostriches but significantly larger. For instance, fossilized remains of birds weighing up to 100 kilograms indicate that large species capable of surviving only in warm climates inhabited these forests. They used their size for protection against predators and could navigate through dense thickets, avoiding open spaces. Notably, reptiles also thrived in these tropical conditions. Fossilized remains of lizards and turtles found in Eocene deposits show that the climate favored their prosperity. In addition to these animals, the forests were teeming with insects, including large species such as flies and beetles that filled the air with their buzzing. Hundreds of plant species, including palms and conifers, created a unique flora that had no modern counterparts on the continent. Rivers and lakes, which provided water and habitat for various aquatic creatures, were also integral to the ecosystem. These forests, which once hosted a rich diversity of life, starkly contrast with today's Antarctica, covered by a thick layer of ice reaching up to 3 kilometers in some places. Today's Antarctica is a desert where temperatures can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius, and life is primarily concentrated along the coast. The barren, icy expanses we see today would be unrecognizable to the inhabitants of those once thriving tropical forests, which left behind only fossilized remnants of their existence. Leading paleontologists, such as Professor David Marshall from the University of Queensland, study these fossils to better understand how climate conditions changed and how this affected life on Earth. For example, in the year 2000, a group of scientists discovered fossilized leaves of plants dated to the Eocene, which revealed that the forests were much more diverse than previously thought. Overall, the Eocene tropical forests of Antarctica serve as a vivid example of how climate conditions can drastically alter the appearance of a continent, creating unique ecosystems that eventually disappear under the pressure of time and environmental changes. Whale-like creatures appeared more than 40 million years ago and represent a remarkable example of evolution from terrestrial mammals to fully aquatic animals. Their earliest ancestors, pachycetids, inhabited coastal zones, hunting fish, and small animals. These wolf-like mammals weighed around 30 kilograms and had a long body with 4 limbs that began to change over time. Studies conducted in 2010 showed that their teeth were perfectly suited for catching fish, indicating the beginning of adaptation to the aquatic environment. Over time, around 40 million years ago, their descendants, ambuloceids, became more aquatic. These semi-aquatic predators reached lengths of up to 4 meters and had a body resembling a crocodile, allowing them to move effectively both on land and in water. The limbs of ambuloceids began to transform into longer and more powerful structures that eventually became flippers, although they still retained the ability to move on land. A significant milestone in the evolutionary journey was the appearance of protocetids, which were fully aquatic creatures living in open seas around 35 million years ago. Fossil remains of protocetids found in Egypt show that their bodies were streamlined and their limbs had fully transformed into flippers. The nostrils of these whales began to migrate to the upper part of the head, allowing them to breathe without raising their bodies to the surface. This migration of nostrils is a clear example of adaptation that can be traced in fossil finds, including the transition from their position on the snout to the upper part of the head. By the end of the Eocene epoch, around 30 million years ago, the evolution of cetaceans reached a new level with the appearance of the first true whales, such as Zelphi and Blausch. These creatures already had the characteristic features of modern whales: streamlined bodies, powerful tail flukes, and specialized organs for echolocation. Fossil finds in the Pacific Ocean showed that the length of some early whale species exceeded 15 meters, indicating how quickly they evolved and adapted to life in the marine environment. These transformations, from pachycetids to modern whales and dolphins, are documented in detailed fossil finds that allow scientists to reconstruct the picture of this extraordinary evolution. The Oligocene cooling, which began around 34 million years ago, was one of the key stages in the history of Earth's climate, marking a significant decrease in global temperature following the Paleogene climatic optimum, a period characterized by much warmer and wetter conditions. This cooling event marked the transition from tropical and subtropical ecosystems to more cold-tolerant biomes, leading to substantial changes in plant and animal life. For instance, during this time, forests composed of heat-loving species began to be replaced by more resilient plants capable of surviving in cooler temperatures. In their place came broadleaf and coniferous forests, as well as steppes and prairies. This climate change also facilitated the spread of cold-tolerant animal species, such as mammals, that were adapted to the new conditions, including the ancestors of modern deer and horses. The Oligocene cooling was a crucial step towards the modern climatic regime of Earth, as it contributed to the formation of new ecosystems that shaped the evolutionary trajectories of many plant and animal groups. At this time, significant changes occurred in ocean currents, which also influenced climatic conditions, creating colder regions and facilitating the spread of ice sheets. Research indicates that this cooling helped in the extinction of some tropical organisms that could not adapt to the new conditions, while other species flourished, filling the ecological niches left vacant by these changes. Thus, the Oligocene cooling acted as a catalyst for evolutionary changes that led to the emergence of new species and the transformation of the familiar face of Earth. This was a time when groups such as mammals and birds began to develop and diversify, creating numerous new forms of life. A striking example is the ancestors of modern horses, which began to adapt to open spaces and new living conditions, eventually spreading across the planet. Meanwhile, the Oligocene cooling led to the formation of the largest ice sheets, which significantly impacted sea levels and terrestrial ecosystems. These climate and ecosystem changes played a crucial role in shaping future climatic conditions and biological diversity, which we observe today. Fossil records show that during this period, evolution proceeded at a rapid pace, reflecting changes in the environment and the adaptation of organisms to new conditions. The Oligocene cooling laid the foundation for subsequent climatic changes that continued to influence Earth for millions of years. This period left its mark on the geological record, and its consequences are still felt today, shaping contemporary ecosystems and climatic conditions. During the Miocene epoch, herbaceous ecosystems began to rapidly spread across the Earth, replacing dense forests and forming new biomes, savannas, steppes, and prairies. This ecological shift, occurring approximately between 23 and 5 million years ago, was a result of global cooling, which altered climatic conditions and intensified seasonal temperature fluctuations. Research indicates that during this time, the average global temperature decreased by several degrees, creating ideal conditions for the spread of grasses. Initially, extensive forest areas began to thin out, and then gave way to open landscapes dominated by grasses. These changes not only altered the planet's appearance, but also opened up new evolutionary opportunities for animals. Hoofed animals, such as the ancestors of modern zebras and antelopes, began to develop the ability to run quickly, which was necessary for survival in open spaces where predators could easily spot them. Vulnerable herbivores adapted by developing more powerful and longer legs, enabling them to reach high speeds and maneuverability, thus creating new habitats for life. Simultaneously, changes occurred in their teeth. Specialized teeth for eating tough, grassy vegetation became the norm among many species. For example, the ancestors of modern horses adapted to consuming coarser food, necessitating the development of a more complex dental structure for efficient chewing. These evolutionary changes were not mere coincidences. They became necessities in conditions where survival depended on the ability to find and digest new food sources. In addition to physical adaptations, these open landscapes fostered the emergence of new strategies for protection against predators. Animals began to develop social behavior and migratory patterns, allowing them to avoid encounters with predators and find safer places for life and reproduction. For instance, groups of antelopes could better protect themselves from attacks by using collective strategies to monitor danger. This shift in ecosystems also led to changes in flora. In savannas and steppes, not only grasses but also shrubs began to dominate, creating new niches for various species. It became evident that ecosystems are not static. They change and adapt in response to climatic and ecological changes. As a result, the Miocene was a period of significant transformations on Earth, giving rise to unique ecosystems that continue to exist today. During this time, herbaceous ecosystems covered more than 30% of the Earth's surface, creating diverse landscapes teeming with life and new challenges for its inhabitants. In the Miocene epoch, the ancestors of humans emerged, representing a unique evolutionary milestone in the history of primates. One of the most well-known Miocene hominids was Proconsul, which lived in the area of modern Eastern Africa around 23 million years ago. These creatures were of significant size, with a body height of up to 1 meter and a weight range of 20 to 40 kilograms. Proconsul had a larger brain compared to other primates of the time, indicating higher mental activity. Its facial features resembled both modern humans and modern apes, suggesting its intermediate position in the evolutionary tree. Another important representative of this period was Dryopithecus, which inhabited Europe and Asia around 21 million years ago. These apes were more adapted to a tree-dwelling lifestyle. Their long arms and short legs allowed them to effectively move through trees, and their skulls had increased volumes, indicating the development of cognitive abilities. Dryopithecus also had an upright posture, allowing them to spend more time on branches rather than just on the ground. They were omnivorous, which helped them survive in conditions where food availability could vary with the season. Ramapithecus, which lived around 14 million years ago, also played a significant role in evolution. Its remains were found in the area of modern Pakistan. Ramapithecus had various characteristics that distinguished it from its predecessors. Its teeth and jaws showed that it could handle a diverse diet, including fruits and seeds. Ramapithecus was larger than its predecessors with a height of up to 1 meter. Its limbs showed adaptations for both tree climbing and walking on the ground, indicating an evolutionary transition that would later be crucial for the emergence of hominids. These Miocene primates inhabited tropical forests that were significantly more extensive than today. The forests offered abundant resources, including fruits, seeds, and leaves, which contributed to the diversity of their diet and lifestyle. Primates developed social structures that allowed them to unite for food search and protection from predators. It was during the Miocene that the evolutionary lines diverged, leading to modern hominids and humans. This period was an evolutionary catalyst, during which various species began to develop in different directions, forming unique adaptations to their ecological conditions. The lifestyle of these ancient creatures was complex, multifaceted, and adaptable, allowing them to survive in a changing world. Ultimately, it was these small but significant changes that formed the basis for the emergence of hominids, which later led to the appearance of modern humans. The Pliocene was a period when the climate and geography of Earth began to significantly approach the conditions we have today. During this time, the continents had already taken their current positions, creating the prerequisites for the formation of modern biomes. A distinctive feature of this stage was the interaction between oceans, land, and atmosphere, which is similar to what we see today, facilitating the development of diverse ecosystems. The Pliocene was a time when the planet's temperature gradually decreased, preparing the biosphere for the onset of the Ice Age. During this period, many modern groups of animals and plants acquired their recognizable forms, indicating a process of adaptation to changing conditions. For example, many mammals began to develop adaptations to a colder climate, including changes in their fur, which became a crucial factor for survival in conditions approaching the Pleistocene. This period was also characterized by an increase in the diversity of herbaceous and woody plants, which formed the basis for the ecological communities we can observe today. The formed savannas and forests became habitats for numerous species, also contributing to the evolution of various animals, including the ancestors of modern large herbivores. A significant aspect of the Pliocene was its influence on the migration of species. Changes in climate and ecosystems facilitated the movement of animals to new territories, thereby increasing biological diversity. Scientific research shows that significant changes in the composition of flora and fauna occurred during this time, allowing some species to gain an advantage in the competition for resources. Therefore, the Pliocene became a crucial transitional stage between the warm Miocene and the cold Pleistocene, providing conditions for further evolution and adaptation to new climatic challenges. According to geologists, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere during this period was around 300 parts per million, which contributed to the creation of warm and humid conditions over a large part of the planet. As a result, this period laid the foundation for the formation of ecosystems that we observe today, including forests, savannas, and steppes, as evidenced by the findings of fossil remains discovered in various regions of the world. The Messinian crisis of salinity, which occurred around 6 million years ago, was a catastrophic event for the Mediterranean Sea. The formation of the Panama Isthmus occurred as a result of intense volcanic activity during the late Miocene and Pliocene epochs, approximately between 10 and 3 million years ago. During this period, mountain ranges emerged, creating a land bridge between North and South America. Previously, a single ocean connected the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, but this ocean began to divide into two separate oceans. This geological transformation significantly altered ocean currents, changing their direction and strength. The creation of the Panama Isthmus acted as a catalyst for the formation of the Gulf Stream, one of the most powerful warm currents, which transports warm water from equatorial regions of the Atlantic to northern latitudes. This process not only strengthened the Gulf Stream, but also altered the circulation of water in the oceans, which in turn had a significant impact on the climate of the entire planet. The new conditions that arose after the formation of the isthmus contributed to cooling in the northern hemisphere. The increased heat transferred by the Gulf Stream to Europe created a contrast with the cold waters coming from the north, leading to more pronounced temperature changes. These climatic changes became the basis for the onset of the Ice Age, which covered the northern hemisphere around 2 million years ago. Scientific research shows that the formation of the Panama Isthmus not only altered ocean currents, but also led to significant changes in the biosphere. The migration of animals between the two continents increased, resulting in the appearance of new species and the extinction of old ones. This process, known as invasion, enriched the ecosystems of both Americas, but also affected some species that could not adapt to the new conditions. Furthermore, changes in ocean currents subsequently led to the formation of a more stable climate in tropical regions, which facilitated the development of diverse ecosystems. However, the colder temperatures in the north created conditions for the formation of glaciers, which eventually led to the formation of large ice sheets, such as the Laurentide and California ice sheets, that covered significant areas of North America. As a result, the Panama Isthmus became not only a geological, but also a climatic divider, changing the face of the planet. Scientists continue to study the consequences of this event to understand how similar geological changes can affect climate and ecosystems in the future. Currently, it is known that the formation of the Panama Isthmus occurred approximately 3 million years ago, and its influence on climatic conditions continues to this day. The Great American Interchange was a massive biogeographical event that occurred approximately 3 million years ago, when the Isthmus of Panama connected North and South America, allowing the faunas of both continents to meet and begin interacting. This bridge between continents became the stage for a grand migration, in which animals that had long developed in isolation began to move towards each other. On one side, northern species, adapted to cold climatic conditions, moved south in search of new territories and resources. On the other side, southern animals, accustomed to warmer and more diverse conditions, headed north. This exchange acted as a catalyst for significant changes in the ecosystems of both continents, introducing new competitors and predators that could alter the established balance. For example, some species that had previously known no competition encountered new threats, leading to changes in their behavior and adaptation. Not all species could survive in the new ecosystems, and many disappeared, which is typical of such events when one continent absorbs elements of another. Others, however, were able to occupy new niches, quickly adapting to the changed conditions. Thus, slow and less adapted species began to retreat to the south or less populated areas, while more aggressive and adaptive species, such as predators, began to dominate. Research shows that this faunal exchange not only altered biological diversity, but also influenced the climatic conditions of both continents. As animals migrated through the Isthmus of Panama, they changed the structures of ecosystems, affecting vegetation and soil compositions. Scientists like Dr. David Stanley note that events like the Great American Interchange serve as important examples of how changes in geography can significantly impact biological life. Studies show that around 30% of the species crossing the Isthmus of Panama disappeared due to competition, while some northern species, such as certain mammals, became dominant in the new conditions. These movements not only altered ecosystems, but also created new ecological connections that are still being studied today. As a result, the Great American Interchange became one of the most significant events in the history of biogeography, leaving a deep mark on the diversity of life on the planet. The Pleistocene Ice Age, which lasted from around 2 million to 10,000 years ago, was an epoch when vast ice sheets, several kilometers thick, covered extensive areas of North America, Europe, and Northern Asia. These glaciers, known as the Laurentide Ice Sheet in North America and the Scandinavian Ice Sheet in Europe, transformed the Earth's landscape beyond recognition. For instance, the Laurentide Ice Sheet extended from present-day Canada to the northern parts of the United States, creating deep lakes such as the Great Lakes, which formed due to the melting of ice and erosion. These lakes, covering an area of around 14,000 square kilometers, became significant water bodies influencing the climate and ecosystems of the region. Throughout this period, glaciers periodically advanced and retreated, leading to dramatic changes in the continent's geography. One of the striking examples of such changes is the formation of fjords in Norway, where glaciers carved deep canyons that later filled with seawater, creating picturesque bays and rocky shores. Moraines, formed from the debris left behind by retreating glaciers, also shaped a unique landscape in many regions, including the central parts of the United States. Fluctuations in sea level, caused by changes in climate and the volume of glaciers, created and destroyed land bridges between continents. For example, the Bering Land Bridge, which connected Asia and North America, emerged during ice ages when sea levels dropped, allowing the migration of animals and people. This facilitated the spread of species such as mammoths and bison, as well as early humans who likely crossed this bridge in search of new hunting grounds. Around 15,000 years ago, as the glaciers melted, sea levels rose, flooding many of these bridges and isolating diverse ecosystems that have persisted to this day. With each new cycle of glaciation and thawing, the planet experienced not only changes in climate, but also the evolution of flora and fauna, making the Pleistocene epoch one of the most significant in Earth's history. Scientific research indicates that the changes that occurred during this time served as catalysts for the formation of modern ecosystems and climatic conditions, as evidenced by fossil finds dating back to this period. The Pleistocene megafauna consisted of an extraordinary and diverse array of giant animals that inhabited all continents, from North America to Australia. Mammoths, perhaps the most well-known of these, could reach heights of up to 4 meters and weigh around 6 tons. These animals were adapted to cold climates due to their thick fur and subcutaneous fat, which protected them from harsh winters. Mammoths lived in herds, which helped them defend against predators and find food in the vast tundras and steppes. Mastodons, their closest relatives, were somewhat smaller but had a similar lifestyle. They preferred forested areas and fed on leaves and branches. Woolly rhinos, which also lived in glacial conditions, could reach heights of 3 meters and had powerful horns that they used for defense against predators and territory fights. Their dense fur and thick skin protected them from the cold, while their wide feet allowed them to move across snowy and marshy landscapes. While rhinos and mammoths preferred open spaces, giant sloths like megatheriums inhabited forests and had lengths of around 4 meters. These herbivorous animals fed on leaves and branches, and their massive size and powerful limbs allowed them to move effectively through trees. Saber-toothed cats, such as Smilodon, were among the most dangerous predators of their time. They had enormous fangs up to 20 centimeters long, which they used to hunt large herbivores like mammoths and bison. These cats could weigh up to 200 kilograms and had powerful hind legs, allowing them to quickly attack their prey. Cave bears, which could reach heights of up to 3 meters when standing, had powerful jaws and large claws, making them formidable predators, although they primarily fed on plant material. The social behavior of megafauna varied depending on the species. Mammoths and mastodons lived in herds, where females and their young were protected by stronger males. This allowed for the care of offspring and defense against predators. Saber-toothed cats likely hunted in small groups, increasing their chances of successful hunts. However, many of these species could not survive the changes in climate as temperatures began to rise and forests displaced open spaces. By the end of the Pleistocene, around 10,000 years ago, most megafauna had gone extinct. Studies suggest that this could have been due to a combination of climate change and hunting by early humans who were beginning to settle new territories and use more advanced hunting tools. The preserved remains of these remarkable animals, such as mammoths, have been found in Siberia, where their well-preserved bodies allow scientists to study their genetics and way of life. The extinction of megafauna during the Pleistocene epoch, which occurred approximately between 30 and 10,000 years ago, was one of the most dramatic events in Earth's history. During this period, the planet lost numerous large animals that dominated ecosystems. It is easy to imagine a world where giant creatures roamed vast expanses and nature teemed with diverse forms of life. However, as a result of this extinction, which lasted only a few thousand years, this world became unrecognizable. The unique natural balance that had evolved over millions of years was disrupted, as if someone had erased an entire page from the book of life. In this catastrophic process, megafauna disappeared selectively. Large terrestrial animals such as mammoths and woolly rhinos became victims of this global change, while smaller mammals, birds, and marine creatures survived this crisis relatively unscathed. This led to a reduction in ecosystem diversity, with many ecological niches left vacant. Researchers note that the extinction of megafauna did not occur uniformly worldwide. In some regions, such as Australia and America, it was particularly pronounced, while in others, like Europe, changes were less noticeable. Around the same time, early human societies began to develop on Earth, contributing to the alteration of ecosystems, although they were not the sole cause of the extinction. By the end of the Pleistocene, there were significantly fewer large animals left on the planet, which inevitably affected the further evolution of all species. Ultimately, megafauna, once awe-inspiring in its power and diversity, became a mere memory, leaving behind only fossilized remains that modern scientists study using advanced technologies. In this context, recent findings from this period help scientists better understand how ecosystems changed and how these changes might impact the future of our planet. Specifically, genetic studies conducted on samples found in Siberia provide insights into the life of megafauna and its interactions with the environment. The hypothesis regarding the role of humans in the Pleistocene extinction is based on the assumption that early hunters, armed with spears and organized into groups, became a significant factor contributing to the disappearance of large megafauna. These hunters, who lived approximately between 200,000 and 10,000 years ago, could effectively utilize their skills to hunt animals such as mammoths and woolly rhinos. As they explored new territories, they likely operated according to a wave of extinction model. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, appeared in Africa approximately 300,000 years ago. Research shows that they evolved from ancestors who inhabited this continent and began to develop unique physical and cognitive traits. A significant stage in their evolution was the development of more complex toolkits, including stone and bone tools, which allowed our ancestors to effectively hunt and gather food. Over the course of approximately 40,000 years, Homo sapiens began migrating beyond Africa, coinciding with the last ice ages, which created new paths for settlement. Groups of people, consisting of a small number of members, crossed deserts, mountain ranges, and even straits, adapting to various climatic conditions and ecosystems. On their way to new territories, they encountered other human species, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, who lived in Europe and Asia. Interaction between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, for example, occurred around 40,000 years ago when our ancestors began settling in Europe. This is evidenced by findings showing the presence of common genes between modern humans and Neanderthals, which supports the hypothesis of interbreeding between these species. Adaptive abilities of Homo sapiens were evident in their ability to create tools, build shelters, and develop social structures, which ensured their survival in various conditions. They used fire to cook food and protect themselves from predators, and were the first to engage in art, creating cave paintings and decorations. Gradually, under the influence of climate change and available resources, Homo sapiens continued their spread, reaching distant corners such as Australia and America, which occurred around 65,000 years ago. Their journeys were often long and arduous, sometimes involving maritime crossings, such as the crossing of the strait between Asia and America. This migration process continued for millennia, and each new group of people brought their skills, traditions, and knowledge to new lands. The unique ability of Homo sapiens to learn and cooperate allowed them to create complex societies, which ultimately enabled this species to settle nearly every corner of the planet. Archaeological finds, such as tools and household items, allow us to understand how they adapted to new conditions using resources available in each specific ecosystem. The spread of Homo sapiens over thousands of years became a crucial factor in shaping modern humanity, and their ability to survive and thrive in the most diverse conditions remains one of the key characteristics of our species. According to estimates, there are currently around 7 billion people living on Earth, which is a direct result of those early migration waves that began in Africa. The Holocene is a geological epoch that began with the end of the last ice age and continues to the present day, representing a unique stage in Earth's history. During this time, glaciers that once covered significant parts of the land began to retreat, opening up new territories and shaping modern coastlines. The climate became more stable, leading to the emergence of familiar weather conditions. The formation of new ecosystems allowed for the development of diverse flora and fauna, creating favorable conditions for human life. It was during the Holocene that humanity transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle of hunting and gathering to a settled existence, which led to the development of agriculture. People began to domesticate plants and animals, laying the foundation for the emergence of the first agricultural societies. As population numbers grew and food sources became more stable, there was a need for more complex social structures, leading to the construction of the first cities and the rise of civilizations. An example of this is Mesopotamia, where around 10,000 years ago, the first urban settlements such as Ur and Uruk began to be built. During this time, technology also advanced, the invention of agriculture, plows, and irrigation systems. These innovations significantly increased crop yields, contributing to population growth and social changes. The accumulation of surplus products led to the development of trade and the establishment of the first states. People began to build temples and palaces, creating cultural and religious centers. The Holocene was a time of significant changes as humans began to actively influence their environment, exploring new lands and resources. These processes led to the formation of new worldviews, ultimately resulting in the creation of complex societies with well-defined social and economic structures. For example, the Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, began using cuneiform writing for record-keeping and administration, which became the basis for further developments in writing. This period also saw significant changes in culture, art, and science. The development of agriculture and a settled lifestyle altered relationships between people, creating new social hierarchies and roles. During the Holocene, humanity actively explored the land, leading to fundamental changes in ecosystems and biodiversity. For instance, the domestication of animals and plants resulted in some species becoming dependent on humans, leading to their survival and spread in new conditions. With the development of technology and society, human impact on nature became increasingly evident, forming the basis for future ecological changes on the planet. As a result of active land exploration and changes to natural landscapes, humans became not just a part of nature, but a significant factor influencing its development. During the Holocene, not only did living conditions change, but also the very way of life for humans, who began to consciously manage their environment. The Neolithic Revolution, which occurred approximately 10,000 years ago, marked a turning point in human history when people began to consciously engage in agriculture and animal domestication instead of relying on hunting and gathering practices. In this process, the first cultures to actively take up farming were the inhabitants of the Near East, now known as the Fertile Crescent. These people adopted a settled lifestyle starting around the 8th millennium BCE and were the first to cultivate wheat, barley, and legumes. Meanwhile, in China, local residents began cultivating rice and millet, allowing them to adapt to diverse climatic conditions and develop their own agricultural cultures. Around 7,000 years ago, in Mesoamerica, the first farmers began to cultivate maize, beans, and squash, creating a trio that would later serve as the basis for the diet of millions. These changes significantly influenced human lifestyle. The transition from a nomadic to a settled way of life became possible due to more predictable food sources. People began to build permanent settlements, such as Çatalhöyük, where archaeologists discovered complex structures with numerous rooms and public spaces, indicating the development of social organization. Gradually, the population grew, leading to the emergence of the first cities, and, consequently, the complexity of social structures. Specialized professions, such as potters and blacksmiths, began to produce goods for exchange. Additionally, with the growth of settled communities, social hierarchies emerged, with some families becoming more influential due to control over resources, which in turn contributed to the formation of early state structures. The need to store and preserve harvests required the development of new storage and processing technologies, such as the creation of grain silos, which also impacted the economic life of society. As a result of the Neolithic Revolution, there was a transition from simple survival to a complex life where people began to consciously manage their environment and create social connections that defined their daily lives for thousands of years. The first agricultural cultures not only changed the way food was produced, but also served as the foundation for the civilizations we know today. An example of this is the Sumerian civilization in Mesopotamia, which, based on advanced agriculture, created one of the first writing systems and complex religious rituals. In this context, the appearance of the first written signs around 3000 BCE became possible due to the need to record information about agricultural cycles and household operations. The Holocene climatic optimum, which began around 9,000 years ago and lasted until approximately 5,000 years ago, was a period when global temperatures were 1 to 2 degrees Celsius higher than today's. This time was characterized by a more humid climate, particularly in regions such as northern Africa, where the Sahara was not a desert but covered with green savannas and vast lakes, creating ideal conditions for life. During this time, large lakes existed, such as Lake Chad, which then occupied a much larger area than it does now, attracting numerous animal and human species. These favorable conditions became the basis for the active spread of agriculture. In this climatic optimum, agriculture was particularly noticeable in regions such as the Near East, where around 8,000 years ago, people began to cultivate barley and wheat, marking the beginning of the agricultural revolution. Simultaneously, in Northern Europe and the Arctic, warmer conditions allowed for the survival and development of cultures such as the Funnelbeaker people, who began to settle new territories and increase their food supplies. As a result, these climate changes contributed to population growth, as more accessible resources allowed people not only to survive, but also to reproduce. For example, in the territory of modern Iraq, in the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, around 7,000 years ago, the first urban centers began to form, such as Uruk, where the population reached several thousand people. The development of agriculture also contributed to social changes, as the need to manage surplus production became the basis for the formation of the first state formations. Residents began to build complex irrigation systems to ensure constant access to water for their fields. At the same time, in Mesoamerica, around 7,000 years ago, the Maya began to engage in agriculture, which contributed to the formation of the first settlements. Thus, the Holocene climatic optimum became a catalyst for the development of human society in various regions of the world, creating conditions for the formation of early civilizations and increasing cultural exchange. An example of this is the emergence of the Neolithic culture, which covered areas from India to Europe, where people began to master new methods of land cultivation and settlement. During this time, not only did the population increase, but also the diversity of cultural practices such as pottery and textiles, which in turn led to the emergence of more complex social structures and exchange between different groups. As a result of this climatic optimum, humanity was given a unique opportunity to transition from a nomadic lifestyle to settled life, which in turn became the basis for the creation of the first civilizations, such as the Sumerians and Egyptians. The Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch characterized by significant human impact on planetary processes and ecosystems. During this time, the activities of a single species, humans, have become a major force, comparable to natural phenomena that have shaped Earth over millions of years. Humans have not merely adapted to their environment, but have become active modifiers of it. We have created cities, deforested landscapes, and developed mineral resources, all of which have led to changes in landscapes and ecosystems. As a result of these interventions, we observe a decline in biodiversity. According to the World Wildlife Fund, more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction due to human activities. We have learned to alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere by adding carbon dioxide and methane in vast quantities through the burning of fossil fuels and agriculture. This, in turn, affects the climate and leads to global warming, which threatens ecosystems and life on the planet. Humans are now capable of moving billions of tons of rock, creating massive quarries and influencing geological processes. For example, in China, the construction of dams and reservoirs alters river courses and impacts ecosystems that depend on these water bodies. We also affect global biogeochemical cycles, such as the carbon and nitrogen cycles, which support life on Earth. Intensive agriculture, based on the heavy use of fertilizers, leads to the accumulation of nitrates in water bodies and changes in ecosystems. This process is also linked to an increase in eutrophication, where water bodies become overloaded with nutrients, leading to mass algal blooms and fish kills. We have witnessed how human activities affect not only local ecosystems, but also the planet as a whole, creating a new reality where humans play a dominant role. The uniqueness of the Anthropocene lies in the fact that no conscious being has ever had such an impact on planetary processes. We are the cause of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and environmental pollution, which threaten our own existence. Humans have become leading participants in geological processes, influencing them in the same way that glaciers or volcanoes once did. This presents us with a challenge that requires a rethinking of our relationship with nature and the search for sustainable ways of existence. The number of people on the planet has exceeded 8 billion, and this number continues to grow, increasing the pressure on resources and ecosystems. In the future, we must recognize that our existence and well-being depend on the state of the planet, and we must act to preserve it for future generations. The Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 18th century, fundamentally transformed the interaction between humans and nature, ushering in an era of mass exploitation of fossil fuels. The 18th and 19th centuries witnessed the release of solar energy stored in coal, oil, and natural gas over millions of years within just a few centuries. In 1777, James Watt's steam engine was launched in Britain, serving as a catalyst for the widespread construction of factories that required immense amounts of energy. These factories produced textiles, metal, and a wide array of other goods, significantly increasing labour productivity. Concurrently, transportation infrastructure developed. In 1836, the first railway in Britain, connecting Liverpool and Manchester, was opened. This not only changed the ways people and goods travelled, but also laid the foundation for urbanisation, as millions migrated to cities in search of work. By the 18th century, London was already home to over 1 million people, making it the largest city in the world. Urban life led to unprecedented population growth, with the population increasing several-fold over a century. Simultaneously, resource consumption rose. While one person used around 30 kilograms of coal per year in the 18th century, By the end of the 19th century, this figure had increased to several tons. The construction of steamships like the Cunard in the 1830s enabled ocean crossings in days, opening new markets and trade opportunities. However, this growth came with negative consequences. Air and water pollution became commonplace in many cities, and natural ecosystems faced significant pressure. Forests were cleared for agricultural expansion, rivers were polluted by industrial waste, and animals lost their natural habitats. The 18th and 19th centuries were an era when humans first fully recognized their power and influence over nature, but also began to understand the consequences of their actions. By the end of the 19th century, coal had become the primary energy source for over 80% of all industrial processes. Modern climate change is one of the most pressing issues facing humanity, and its causes are primarily linked to human activity. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, over the past 100 years, the average global temperature has risen by 1 degree Celsius, the largest increase in temperature over the last 10,000 years. This increase is due to the emission of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, which are mainly produced by the burning of fossil fuels for energy production, transportation, and heating. Approximately 70% of all carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere come from the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas. Changes in land use, such as deforestation and conversion of land for agriculture, also exacerbate the situation, as trees that absorb carbon dioxide are disappearing and soil that can store carbon is being destroyed. As a result, the planet's energy balance is disrupted. More heat is trapped in the atmosphere, leading to an increase in ocean temperatures. Existing data show that since the beginning of the 20th century, the average temperature of ocean surface waters has risen by 1 degree, which has a devastating impact on marine ecosystems. Glaciers and polar ice, such as Greenland and Antarctica, are melting at an unprecedented rate. For example, in Greenland, approximately 30 billion tons of ice are lost annually, significantly raising sea levels. Currently, global sea levels have risen by 25 centimeters, and by the end of the century, they are projected to rise by an additional meter, threatening coastal cities and ecosystems. Moreover, climate change is causing the destabilization of weather systems, which manifests in the intensification of storms and hurricanes. 8 out of 10 of the most destructive hurricanes in history have occurred in the last 2 decades, and Hurricane Katrina, which struck New Orleans in 2005, became a symbol of the destructive power of climate change. Heat waves are becoming more frequent and prolonged, and droughts are affecting regions that were once fertile. For example, in the United States, since 2010, there has been an increase in the number of days with temperatures above 35 degrees. Leading to losses in agriculture and an increase in the number of heat stress-related illnesses. Changes in seasonal cycles affect ecosystems, disrupting animal migration and plant flowering. In countries like Canada, climate change has already led to a shift in the habitats of some species, such as the polar bear, which is losing its traditional hunting grounds due to the melting of ice. These changes also impact human communities, especially in developing countries where resources and infrastructure are less resilient to climate shocks. According to the World Health Organization, climate change has already caused an additional 32,000 deaths per year from climate-related diseases such as malaria and diarrhea. The devastating consequences of global warming underscore the urgent need for immediate and decisive action to mitigate its effects and adapt to new conditions. Mass extinction in the modern era is a phenomenon where species disappear at a rate significantly higher than the natural background extinction rate, which is approximately 1 species per million per year. Over the past decades, we have observed that human activity has led to a sharp reduction in biological diversity on the planet. The destruction of habitats, caused by factors such as deforestation for agricultural purposes and urbanization, has become one of the main causes of species extinction. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and this process is accelerating. Environmental pollution, including plastic waste and chemicals entering water bodies and soil, also contributes to the decline in population numbers. Overexploitation of resources, such as in the fishing industry, leads to the depletion of marine ecosystems, resulting not only in the disappearance of individual species, but also in the disruption of food chains. The introduction of invasive species, often occurring as a result of human activity, creates additional threats to local ecosystems, displacing native species from their natural habitats. Climate change, caused by greenhouse gas emissions, has a destructive impact on ecosystems, altering temperature regimes and precipitation levels, making life impossible for many species. Unlike past mass extinctions, such as the Triassic, Jurassic, or Permian Triassic, which were caused by natural catastrophes, the current processes of species extinction are a direct consequence of the actions of one species, humans. These actions not only threaten individual species, but also put the entire biosphere at risk, making it more homogeneous and less resilient. A decrease in biodiversity leads to a reduction in the resilience of ecosystems, which can result in the disruption of their functions, such as plant pollination and water purification. According to scientists, if no immediate measures are taken, by the middle of the 21st century, we may lose up to 60% of all species on Earth. These figures underscore the need for awareness of the consequences of our impact on nature and the search for ways to achieve a more sustainable coexistence with the environment. The mass extinction currently taking place is not just a statistic, it is a real threat that is relevant to each of us. Coral reefs, often referred to as marine tropical forests, are some of the most complex and diverse ecosystems on the planet. These structures provide homes for more than a quarter of all known marine species, including fish, mollusks, and marine mammals. However, in recent decades, corals face unprecedented threats due to climate change and ocean acidification. According to the World Wildlife Fund, over the past 30 years, ocean temperatures have risen by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, leading to mass coral bleaching. Bleaching occurs when corals lose their symbiotic algae, zooxanthellae, which not only give them color, but also provide them with energy through photosynthesis. This process can be compared to a person losing their source of nutrition. Corals become vulnerable and can perish if subjected to prolonged stress from high temperatures. Scientists like Dr. Ken Kinney from the University of Hawaii report that bleaching can occur in just a few days if water temperatures rise to critical levels. Additionally, the ocean absorbs around 30% of the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere, leading to its acidification. This acidification makes it difficult for corals to form calcium carbonate skeletons necessary for their growth and protection. Estimates suggest that if current trends continue, by the middle of the 21st century, more than 90% of coral reefs may disappear. This would lead to the collapse of ecosystems that support thousands of marine organisms, from small fish to large mammals like dolphins and sea turtles. The loss of reefs not only threatens these species, but also has serious economic consequences for millions of people who depend on fishing and tourism. Coral reefs generate more than $1 billion annually from fishing and tourism, providing livelihoods for many coastal communities. Research shows that the loss of each ton of coral reef can result in the loss of up to 10 tons of fish. This highlights the importance of these ecosystems for maintaining ocean health and human well-being. The global community now faces the challenge of protecting and restoring coral reefs before it is too late. Every year, tropical forests lose around 10 million hectares of their area, which is equivalent to the size of Iceland. This process, known as deforestation, is primarily carried out to obtain agricultural land, pastures for livestock, palm oil plantations, and to extract minerals. For instance, in Brazil, since the early 2000s, deforestation in the Amazon has increased by 80%, leading to the disappearance of vast areas of unique ecosystems. In place of the cleared forests, monotonous fields appear, where only a few agricultural crops grow. This is not just the destruction of trees. It is the destruction of entire ecosystems inhabited by millions of animal and plant species, many of which are found nowhere else on the planet. The loss of tropical forests leads to a catastrophic loss of biodiversity. According to scientists, every day, around 100 species of plants and animals, including rare ones like the Amazonian manatee and jaguar, go extinct. Deforestation also causes soil erosion, leading to the loss of fertile topsoil and a decrease in agricultural potential. As a result, heavy rains wash away the topsoil, making the land unsuitable for further cultivation. Tropical forests play a crucial role in maintaining local climate by creating humidity and regulating temperature. When forests are cleared, the climate becomes drier and hotter, affecting local communities that depend on a stable climate for agriculture and fishing. Additionally, the water cycle is disrupted as trees absorb and release water, and without them, the levels of water bodies can significantly decrease, complicating access to fresh water. Tropical forests are often referred to as the lungs of the planet due to their ability to absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. For example, the Amazon forests absorb around 12 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year, which accounts for around 30% of all carbon absorbed by the world's forests. The destruction of these forests exacerbates the problem of climate change as it releases carbon that has been accumulated over centuries. According to experts, if the rate of deforestation does not slow down, by the end of the 21st century, we may lose up to 90% of the existing tropical forests. This is not just an ecological catastrophe, it is a threat to the future of humanity and the entire planet. Anthropogenic landscape refers to territories created or significantly altered by humans, which are increasingly occupying space on Earth. Since the beginning of the agricultural revolution, approximately 10,000 years ago, humans have been transforming their surroundings to meet their needs, resulting in the creation of agricultural lands, cities, and infrastructure. Sustainable agriculture requires large tracts of land, leading to deforestation and drainage of wetlands. These actions fragment natural ecosystems, creating new landscapes that can no longer support the previous biodiversity. As a result, in a world once dominated by wild nature, fields, roads, and buildings now prevail. For instance, by the 20th century, around 30% of Earth's surface was transformed for agricultural purposes. Urbanization, which accelerated in the mid-20th century, also plays a crucial role in landscape change. Globally, according to UN data, more than 50% of the population now lives in cities, and this figure may reach 70% by the 21st century. Cities are complex ecosystems where concrete and asphalt replace natural elements and green spaces become islands in a sea of concrete. This leads to changes in microclimate and a decrease in biodiversity, as many species cannot adapt to these new conditions. For example, some birds and mammals that once inhabited these areas now face the threat of extinction due to habitat loss and changes in the food chain. Infrastructure such as roads and bridges also divides animal populations, leading to genetic isolation and reduced survival ability. In new anthropogenic landscapes, adaptable species like sparrows and pigeons find an ally in humans, but many less adaptable organisms are at risk of extinction. Additionally, climate change, driven by human activity, exacerbates the situation, creating additional stresses for ecosystems, and consequently, cultures that depend on these ecosystems also face difficulties. Anthropogenic landscapes, in which we live, are not only the result of human activity, but also new ecological conditions to which some species can adapt while others are on the brink of extinction. Research indicates that by the 25th century, up to 30% of all existing species may disappear. Urban ecosystems are unique artificial landscapes where asphalt, concrete, and glass create conditions that starkly differ from the natural. These spaces form heat islands, where temperatures can be several degrees higher than in surrounding areas. For instance, in Tokyo, the temperature difference between the city centre and its outskirts can reach 6 degrees Celsius in the summer months. The altered hydrological regime in cities causes rainwater to run off streets instead of being absorbed into the soil, leading to flood risks. Urban soil, unlike rural soil, contains high levels of construction materials and plastic waste, resulting in a composition that is not suitable for ordinary plants. Nevertheless, it is in these conditions that species adapted to living near humans find refuge. City pigeons, sparrows, and rats become common inhabitants of megacities, actively utilizing available resources. For example, sparrows, which once lived in the wild, now nest on balconies and windowsills. Foxes and raccoons, once rare in urban environments, now inhabit parks and even streets, finding food in trash cans and at picnics. Meanwhile, plants like wild sorrel and dandelions colonize cracks in asphalt and abandoned lots, demonstrating remarkable resilience. These species find ways to survive in conditions that initially seem hostile. The urban ecosystem becomes a kind of evolutionary laboratory where organisms adapt to new conditions at an accelerated pace. For example, a study conducted in New York in 2013 showed that the city's sparrow population has higher stress tolerance to noise and pollution compared to their rural counterparts. Urban ecosystems not only provide new habitats for species, but also serve as arenas for natural selection, where the survival of the most adapted individuals becomes the primary factor. According to ecologists, by the 25th century, more than 7 million people will live in megacities, further altering the dynamics of these unique ecosystems. In recent decades, the movement for nature conservation has gained strength, reflecting the growing awareness of the value of wild nature and the need to preserve it for future generations. A significant step in this direction has been the creation of national parks, nature reserves, and marine protected areas, which serve as sanctuaries for endangered species and ecosystems. For instance, in 2004, the Russian national park Lenski Stolby was established, covering more than 700 square kilometers and home to rare species such as the snow leopard and the white stork. These territories protect not only animals, but also unique landscapes, such as the peculiar rocks and picturesque rivers, which play a crucial role in maintaining biological diversity. One of the key directions in nature conservation is the restoration of degraded landscapes. In 2015, a project to restore ecosystems on the island of Svalbard in Norway began, where, with the help of local residents and scientists, thousands of trees were planted, allowing local wildlife to return. Additionally, the reintroduction of species that had disappeared in the wild, such as the wild bison in North America, has become a notable event. In 2006, bison were reintroduced to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, symbolizing success in efforts to restore ecosystems. Creating ecological corridors between fragmented habitats is also a crucial aspect of nature conservation. In 2013, a project to create a migration corridor for wild animals in the Appalachian region was implemented, connecting several national parks and reserves and providing a safe path for species such as moose and black bears. These corridors help not only preserve genetic diversity, but also reduce the risk of wild animals colliding with vehicles. These efforts represent humanity's attempt to find a balance between development and the preservation of Earth's natural heritage. A notable example is the International Initiative to Protect Marine Ecosystems, within which, by 2020, more than 32% of marine territories were declared protected. This ensures the protection of vulnerable ecosystems such as coral reefs, which are affected by climate change and ocean acidification. The desire to conserve nature is not just an ethical issue, but a necessity for human survival. According to the World Wildlife Fund, by 2030, more than 1 billion people may face a shortage of fresh water if no measures are taken to preserve ecosystems. This underscores that the struggle to preserve nature is not just a romantic idea, but a real necessity that concerns us all. Sustainable development is a concept that implies the ability to meet the needs of the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This idea emerged at the end of the 20th century as a response to growing environmental problems and resource scarcity. According to the World Health Organization, in 2020, more than 30% of the world's population faced a shortage of clean water, highlighting the importance of rational use of natural resources. Sustainable development requires a balance between economic, social, and environmental aspects of human activity. For example, in sustainable agriculture, farmers can use organic farming methods that not only increase crop yields but also preserve soil health. In such systems, plants are used that return nutrients to the soil, reducing the need for chemical fertilizers and helping to maintain biodiversity. Resource use should occur at a rate that does not exceed their regeneration. This means that if we cut down forests, we should plant new trees to allow the ecosystem to recover. In Norway, where reforestation has become a state program, around 30 million saplings are planted annually, not only to preserve forests, but also to improve air quality. Managing waste is also a key aspect of sustainable development. Society should produce waste in quantities that the environment can process. For example, in Germany, more than 50% of waste is recycled, significantly reducing the burden on landfills and helping to save resources. This requires people to be aware of their responsibility for the environment and actively participate in waste management processes. There are many examples of successful implementation of sustainable development principles in different countries. In Sweden, for instance, the government actively supports the use of renewable energy sources such as wind and solar power, which helps to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. By 2030, Sweden plans to achieve net zero carbon emissions, which is an ambitious but necessary goal in the face of global warming. Sustainable development requires not only changes in production processes, but also a change in mindset. Each person should understand that their actions affect the surrounding world. Research shows that awareness of environmental and sustainable development issues leads to changes in consumer behaviour. For example, according to surveys, more than 70% of young people prefer to buy eco-friendly products, highlighting the growing interest in sustainability. Ultimately, sustainable development is not just a trend, but a necessity that requires a comprehensive approach from governments, businesses, and each individual. The pursuit of harmony with natural systems becomes an integral part of our lives, where each step towards a more sustainable future is important and relevant. In 2000, at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, it was emphasized that achieving sustainable development without the active participation of all segments of society is impossible, and this statement remains relevant to this day. The transition to renewable energy sources has become a significant milestone in human history, as society recognized the need to abandon fossil fuels. Since the early 2000s, there has been a rapid adoption of solar panels on residential roofs, which can now be seen in cities and villages worldwide. For instance, in Germany, a leading country in solar energy use, over 2 million solar installations were in place by 2020. Reducing CO2 emissions by more than 80 million tonnes per year. Wind turbines installed on hills and in the sea have become symbols of a new energy era. According to the World Wind Energy Association, the global wind power capacity in 2021 exceeded 700 gigawatts. This allows for the production of electricity without harming the environment. Geothermal power plants, utilizing Earth's heat, are actively developing in Iceland, where more than 60% of the energy consumed is derived from geothermal sources. For example, in Iceland, geothermal installations have helped reduce greenhouse gas emissions by more than 30%. This transition to renewable energy sources not only reduces air and water pollution, but also creates new jobs and technologies. In 2020, over 13 million jobs were created in the renewable energy sector, demonstrating that this sector is not only environmentally friendly, but also economically beneficial. Technological innovations, such as energy-efficient solar panels and modern wind turbines, significantly improve energy production efficiency. For example, the latest generation of solar panels has an efficiency of over 21%, which is twice as high as the first models developed in the 1970s. Renewable energy provides humanity with the ability to meet its energy needs without depleting planetary resources and disrupting its climate balance. An important aspect is that renewable energy sources significantly reduce dependence on fossil fuels like oil and coal, which contribute significantly to global warming. In the 21st century, countries such as China and India are actively developing green energy, which not only improves the environmental situation, but also significantly reduces the cost of importing hydrocarbons. The transition to renewable energy sources is a step towards a more sustainable future. In Europe, for example, in 2020, renewable sources accounted for more than 30% of electricity production, setting a record in history. This transition is important not only for reducing carbon emissions, but also for developing new technologies that will ensure energy security in the face of a changing climate. Restoration of ecosystems and the concept of rewilding are becoming important aspects in the fight against environmental degradation. A notable example is the Rewilding Project in Scotland, where work began in 2006 to restore wild forests that once covered vast areas. Abandoned agricultural lands, previously used for pastures, are returning to their natural state. Here, local tree species such as oak, beech and ash are planted, creating habitats for numerous animals, including rare birds and insects. In the places where forests were once cut down, young saplings are growing, forming new forest areas that protect against erosion and serve as natural barriers against floods. The restoration of wetlands, which were drained for agricultural purposes, is achieved through a process called hydrological restoration. This procedure involves creating dams to block water flow, allowing wetlands to regain their natural functions, which include water filtration and carbon storage in the soil. A key aspect of rewilding is the reintroduction of keystone species. For example, in Norway in 2015, elk were reintroduced, playing the role of ecosystem engineers and contributing to the creation and maintenance of plant diversity. Beavers, reintroduced into various ecosystems across Europe, create ponds that enrich biodiversity, attracting numerous other species such as fish and waterfowl. These changes trigger a cascade of positive effects, such as an increase in the populations of predators that, in turn, control the numbers of herbivores, preventing overgrazing of vegetation. Additionally, ecosystem restoration projects contribute to combating climate change by increasing carbon sequestration. For instance, a study conducted in the UK in 2000 showed that restored peatlands can absorb up to 30 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. This not only increases biodiversity, but also creates opportunities for ecotourism, bringing income to local communities and promoting nature conservation. Ecosystem restoration is not just a trend, but a necessity dictated by the ecological challenges of our time. In 2018, as part of the European Green Deal initiative, it was announced that €100 million would be allocated to ecosystem restoration projects. Such efforts demonstrate that humanity is capable of taking active steps towards restoring nature, recognizing that healthy ecosystems are the foundation of sustainable development. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, and social challenges stand before humanity as never before. The potential future of Earth can be imagined as a branching tree of possibilities, where each branch symbolizes a path we can choose based on our decisions today. For instance, if humanity focuses on sustainable development, we can see the restoration of ecosystems and biodiversity. Scientific research shows that reforestation and wetland restoration can increase the global carbon stock, thereby helping to slow down climate change. The Forest Restoration Program in Brazil, launched in 2012, has already led to the restoration of more than 3 million hectares of tropical forests, indicating potential positive changes in ecosystems. At the same time, if humanity continues to ignore environmental problems such as pollution and overuse of natural resources, we may find ourselves on a path to ecosystem degradation and climate destabilization. For example, according to the World Meteorological Organization, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reached record levels in 2020, leading to more frequent and intense natural disasters. Each of our decisions today shapes the future of the planet, where some paths lead to harmony between humans and nature, while others lead to environmental catastrophes. There are examples of countries that have chosen sustainable development, such as Sweden, which by 2020 had already reduced its carbon emissions by almost 16% compared to the 1990s, actively investing in renewable energy sources. This shows that the right actions can lead to positive changes. However, if the mindless use of resources continues and no measures are taken to protect the environment, we will face degradation that could threaten future generations. Sea levels are rising, and if humanity does not change its habits, many coastal cities may be at risk of flooding by the 2030s. We have the opportunity to change course, but the future of Earth is not predetermined and depends on the decisions we make in the coming decades. Each step we take forms this branching tree of the future, where the choice is ours. Data shows that transitioning to sustainable energy sources can reduce carbon emissions by 30% by 2030. In millions of years, Earth will look completely different from today. The drift of continents will continue. Africa will collide with Europe, leading to the closure of the Mediterranean Sea. This collision, known as collision tectonics, will create new mountain ranges similar to the Alps and cause significant changes in the regional climate. Australia will shift northward, making the continent closer to the equator. This shift will create new ecosystems where tropical forests and savannas will begin to dominate areas that were once covered by dry plains. The Atlantic Ocean will expand, while the Pacific will narrow, increasing tectonic activity in the Pacific Ring of Fire. This will result in an increase in the number of earthquakes and volcanic activity, forming new islands and altering coastal lines. Over millions of years, the biosphere will also change. New plant and animal species will evolve, filling ecological niches left by extinct groups. For example, in conditions of increased temperature, plants capable of surviving in extreme heat and water scarcity, similar to modern succulents but with a much more complex structure and photosynthesis abilities, may appear. In the sea, new marine organisms adapted to acidic waters may replace coral reefs that have gone extinct due to climate change. Animals that previously went extinct, such as mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, may be genetically restored using modern technologies and adapted to new conditions, becoming part of the ecosystem. Additionally, entirely new species may emerge, such as large terrestrial mammals with long legs capable of quickly moving across rough terrain, or flying reptiles that will occupy the ecological niche left by dinosaurs. These species will have unique adaptations, allowing them to survive in a changing climate and conditions that could not support existing ecosystems. The continuity of changes that characterize the history of our planet will be evident, as Earth has existed for more than 4.5 billion years and has experienced numerous catastrophes and transformations. As a result of these changes, new formations will emerge on the surface, while old ones will disappear, demonstrating the eternal process of evolution and adaptation of life on the planet. Scientific research, such as the analysis of sedimentary rocks and fossils, shows that even after mass extinctions, life always found a way to revive and adapt to new conditions. This confirms that changes on Earth are not a matter of if, but when. Ultimately, regardless of humanity's fate, Earth will continue its geological and evolutionary journey, leaving behind traces in the form of new life forms and altered landscapes that will be studied by future generations. Scientific data shows that over the last 50 million years, continents have moved up to 1,000 kilometers, and this trend will continue in the future. The Sun, our star, has been in existence for approximately 14 billion years and is currently midway through its life cycle. Over the next 5 billion years, it will exhaust its hydrogen reserves in the core, leading to dramatic changes. When hydrogen runs out, the Sun will begin to contract under its own gravity, causing an increase in temperature and pressure in the core. As a result, helium will fuse into carbon, and the star will begin to expand, transforming into a red giant. At this stage, the Sun will grow to sizes capable of engulfing nearby planets, including Mercury and Venus. An increase in solar luminosity by several hundred times will significantly heat the Earth, raising temperatures to levels where oceans will start to evaporate. This is expected to occur around 3.5 billion years from now. As a result, Earth's atmosphere will become uninhabitable, and the planet will transform into a scorching desert, similar to modern Venus, where temperatures exceed 400 degrees Celsius. The loss of atmosphere will cause the extinction of all known forms of life and the complete destruction of ecosystems. In this scenario, even if Earth is not engulfed by the Sun, life on it will become impossible long before the star reaches its orbit. This transformation of Earth into a lifeless body will ultimately be a part of the natural cosmic cycle in which stars are born, live, and die. Thus, the red giant that the Sun will become is not the only star to have undergone such a process. Similar transformations occur with other stars in our galaxy, reminding us of the cyclical and inevitable nature of the cosmos. The Sun, in its final stage, will not only be a bright, but also a brief phenomenon, which will conclude when it sheds its outer layers and becomes a white dwarf, leaving behind a planetary nebula. This process may take millions of years, but will inevitably be completed, and this white dwarf will slowly cool over billions of years. Ultimately, even stars like our Sun are subject to the laws of physics and thermodynamics that determine their life and death. transforming them into dust and gas that will once again become part of cosmic matter. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that request.